Oh, here we are, April. We're doing something brand new. I'm trying to stream this on Instagram. I think it's working. Oh no, it looks terrible. It looks so bad.
Wait, is it? Let's see.
Yeah, no, okay.
Oh, you can see our shoulders.
Yeah, I can do this. I can show people what this looks like who are watching. Wait, here.
People
I got
on
it.
Instagram are
There
saying,
you go.
"Oh no,
look at this. Look at how we look.
we gotta lean way over." Okay, if you're on Instagram,
that's not gonna
hop
work.
over to YouTube.
Yeah, goodbye everyone.
We'll
This is
figure
a
out
disaster.
Instagram another day.
Oh, April, what's up? Hey, you win some, you lose some.
You know what? It was a good effort on a Tuesday night.
No, 100%. I figured why not? Let's just try and see what we can make out of this. Good to see you, friends. Welcome in to another live stream, another debate, the VP debate. Wow, 400 people already watching. Unbelievable. So good to be with you. I am Tim Whitaker. I am the creator of the New Evangelicals. We're a nonprofit organization helping people find a better path forward in their faith, rooted in love, justice, inclusivity, and of course, non-dehumanization. And joining me is our Friday co-host for the recap, April LaJoy.
Hello, everybody. It is
April.
I.
It's a big day for you. It's a big day.
It is a really big day. For those of you who may not know,
Where is it?
You better have it, Tim.
I got it. Yes.
Star Spangled Jesus.
It's out today.
Backwards. I need to get my. I don't know how to flip my camera.
I don't know.
Oh no, it's not backwards. I'm dumb. Anyway.
What's up?
It's not backwards. I'm silly. But my book is out now and you can go buy it. I literally drove to 2 bookstores today. I drove to a Barnes & Noble and a local bookstore and they had my book and I took a picture with it and I signed copies and it was a very surreal experience.
I'm just so happy for you, April. Congratulations. As someone who just handed in his own manuscript to his publisher, I know how much work that goes into writing a book. Job well done, well deserved. I hope it does great. You put it next to a book by Eric Metaxas that I also own.
I didn't put it next to it.
Okay, well, someone did.
They put it next to it.
Maybe God did to try and save people away from Christian nationalism.
I think that's my favorite thing because my publisher is technically like a faith Christian publisher. That's an imprint of a larger publisher. But if it does well, it gets on the Amazon list with other Christian nationalist books. And so like next to all the Charlie Kirks and the Eric Metaxas and all these MAGA books, it's like Star Spangled Jesus, leaving Christian nationalism. I'm like,
I love it.
My new mission field.
I
Christian
love it.
Nationalist. Buy my book.
I'm all about it. I'm all about it. So congratulations. I hope it does well. Friends, of course, welcome in. If you can give this video a like as you're watching, it helps YouTube know people are enjoying this video. And hopefully we'll get it out to more people as we tune in together to watch what should be a pretty interesting VP debate. I mean, honestly, this might be personally one of the most anticipated VP debates of my lifetime. I'm so anxious to see what's going to happen. And friends, make sure you hang on after this debate ends because we're bringing on an amazing panel. We're bringing on constitutional lawyer and author Andrew Seidel. We're bringing on historian and author Jamar Tisby and human rights lawyer Qasim Rashid to give their thoughts on what they thought about the debate. So it's going to be a really great show tonight. I'm so happy to have you with me. And yes, we do have, there it is. There's the bingo card, okay? So if you want to grab a snapshot, especially if you're watching on TV, which, by the way, 60% of our viewers watch on their television. They do, by the way, April, which is crazy. Yeah, so we're on the big screen. You can take a snapshot and you can play along with us with vice presidential debate bingo. It should be a rooting tooting time.
Great time. Or you can go to either of our Instagram, Twitter, Facebook pages and download or screenshot it if you'd rather get the bingo card that way.
100%. So
I did read, I don't know if you read that article that Tim Walz has admitted he's not a very good debater and he's really nervous about tonight.
You know what? Okay, let's talk about this for a second while we have a few minutes here. We got about 5 minutes until the debate starts. I was talking to Andrew Seidel before we went live. We were checking our levels and are making sure our cameras and stuff work. And he brought up a good point that I didn't consider, because honestly, I figured that Waltz is just really going to mouth the floor with JD Vance, because JD is just so weird and says the weirdest things. We've all seen him in donut shops. He's not very personable. However, JD Vance is on the far right podcast circuit, and he's used to talking in quick sound bites and saying little quips. And I don't know if that's really Waltz's world, you know? So I'm going to be honest, and we do our best, friends, to call balls and strikes, no matter how much we like or dislike a candidate. I'm a little nervous myself. I don't know how this is going to, how it's going to shake out ultimately, because JD does do this far-right podcaster circuit often, and they're really good at getting in all these, like an avalanche of talking points in a few minutes that are hard to respond to.
Yes. And I do think JD Vance in general just has more debate experience. And I think he's more known in those circles as being a good debater, where Tim Walz is not. And I think when Tim Walz was in the running to be VP, that was something he told them, like, hey, I'm not a good debater. And they picked him anyway.
Right.
It will be interesting. I mean, JD Vance has seemed to take the cue from Trump, where in a lot of his interviews, he's just spouting similar nonsense as Trump. He's kind of repeating, extreme takes on some things, including the Haitians eating pets. He's pushed that too. And, so it will be interesting. I don't really know what to expect. I feel like I kind of had an idea of what to expect before, and now I really don't know.
I'm with you 100%. I'm with you 100%. It's going to be a very interesting debate for sure. And, I told you, April, I'm not drinking tonight because we have an amazing panel coming up after the debate, and I want to be fully lucid for them.
Same.
And yeah, so I'm trying to just stay sane tonight. So I'm excited though. I'm looking forward to it. Oh, Sonny, thank you so much for the super chat. I really appreciate it. Like we said earlier, friends, we are a nonprofit organization, so all super chats, all donations, which, by the way, I have a new slide. If you want to support our work, you can scan a QR code. If you want to support the work that we're doing, all donations and super chats go right to the organization to make this kind of content sustainable and consistent. We drop 3 videos a week on YouTube. We drop 3 episodes on podcasts a week, and we hold space for thousands of people trying to find a better path forward in their faith. So any financial support truly does great work as we let people know that, hey, your only options of being a Christian is not being a Christian nationalist or not being involved in faith at all. There are better paths forward. And so we appreciate truly all of your support. It means the world. Daniel says that he is a childless cat father. Let's do this.
Love that.
I love that. I
have to make a quick confession before we go into this. It's not really a confession. It's more of a heads up. I have not been sleeping the best leading up to release day, and I've been all in. Like, my brain is just like book stuff. So I'm really tired, and I'm a little out of the loop on what's been happening. And so I just want some grace tonight.
Why don't I give you a 30-second update on some big things that are happening?
Please
First off, Iran has shot missiles into Israel, aiming in Tel Aviv, which is a huge continual escalation of what's been going on there. That situation is going to really become a thing. Obviously, the hurricane has destroyed many parts of Georgia, of the Appalachia, and in North Carolina. So there's a lot happening there. So there's a lot going on. And also, Trump lied and said that President Biden has not called the governor of North Carolina. And the governor of North Carolina was like, are we going?
I thought that was Georgia.
Wait, we're here.
Oh, we're here.
And here we see the vice presidential candidates there. Tim Walz standing a lone man behind his lectern. Ed, give us your last thoughts as we watch here.
They're not yet. All right. So anyway, that's happening, and Trump lied about the governor and President Biden not calling the governor, and the governor was like, no, absolutely. We absolutely did that. We talked. So there's a lot going on, and we'll cover more on the recap on Friday. But there's a lot going on. A lot.
Okay. Thank you for catching me up.
And next Monday, I believe the 7th, is the 1-year anniversary of the Hamas attack in Israel that launched us into the ongoing genocide of the Palestinians. So there's a lot happening in the next couple of weeks here that we're going to be covering completely on this channel. So make sure you subscribe, and let's hand it over to these broadcasters and see how we do. So buckle up, friends.
24/7 for exclusive content you won't see anywhere else. Thank you for joining us.
And friends, keep us posted to make sure our audio levels are good. If we're too loud or whatever it is, let me know. I'll try and adjust. Very serious music.
This is serious, Tim.
True.
I wonder if JD's gonna have a couch nearby he could sit on.
Oh, too soon.
I'm just kidding. I'm just a joke. I take it back. I'm tired.
We humanize people here.
Tonight, with just over a month to go until Election Day, the first and only meeting between the two men who hope to become Vice President of the United States, Democratic Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota and Republican Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio.
Now, this is likely the final debate of this election cycle, and voting is already underway in 20 states. CBS News polling shows this remains a race either presidential candidate could win. The CBS News vice presidential debate starts now.
Fight for every single vote, and we're going to take this country back.
And we are ready to continue to build the future together.
We're going to turn this whole country red with President Donald J. Trump's leadership.
Very intense.
At the end of this little journey,
like B-roll.
Kamala Harris as the next president of the United States.
This is a CBS News special, live from CBS News headquarters in New York. America Decides.
Drop to those videographers.
Get your bingo cards ready.
Yeah, get the bingo cards ready.
Good evening, I'm Nora O'Donnell, and thank you for joining us for tonight's CBS News Vice Presidential Debate. We want to welcome our viewers on CBS, on other networks here in the U.S. and around the world. We have a consequential night ahead, and our focus is the issues that matter to you, the voter. Let's introduce the candidates. Minnesota's Democratic Governor Tim Walz and Ohio's Republican Senator J.D. Vance, tonight meeting for the first time.
I'm Margaret Brennan. In order to have a thoughtful and civil debate, these are the rules that both campaigns have agreed to. Questions will be directed at one candidate, who will have 2 minutes to respond. The other candidate will be allowed 2 minutes for rebuttal. Then each candidate will get another minute to make further points, with an additional 1 minute each at the discretion of the moderator. The primary role of the moderators is to facilitate the debate between the candidates, enforce the rules, and provide the candidates with the opportunity to fact-check claims made by each other.
CBS News reserves the right to mute the candidates' microphones to maintain decorum. We have not shared the questions or topics with the campaigns. The stage is set. Governor, Senator, thank you for joining us. Let's get started. Tonight, our country is facing several unfolding crises. The Middle East is on the brink of war. Americans are suffering from the catastrophic impact of Hurricane Helene. And now a labor strike as 25,000 dock workers from Maine to Texas are picketing. We're going to begin tonight with the Middle East. Margaret.
Thank you, Nora. Earlier today, Iran launched its largest attack yet on Israel, but that attack failed, thanks to joint U.S. and Israeli defensive action. President Biden has deployed more than 40,000 U.S. military personnel and assets to that region over the past year to try to prevent a regional war. Iran is weakened, but the U.S. still considers it the largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world, and it has drastically reduced the time it would take to develop a nuclear weapon. It is down now to 1 or 2 weeks' time. Governor Walz, if you were the final voice in the Situation Room, would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran? You have 2 minutes.
Well, thank you. And thank you for those joining at home tonight. Let's keep in mind where this started. October 7th, Hamas terrorists massacred over 1,400 Israelis and took prisoners. Israel's ability to be able to defend itself is absolutely fundamental. Getting its hostages back, fundamental, and ending the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. But the expansion of Israel and its proxies is an absolute fundamental necessity for the United States to have the steady leadership there. You saw it experienced today, where along with our Israeli partners and our coalition, able to stop the incoming attack. But what's fundamental here is that steady leadership is going to matter. It's clear, and the world saw it on that debate stage a few weeks ago, a nearly 80-year-old Donald Trump talking about crowd sizes is not what we need in this moment. But it's not just that. It's those that were closest to Donald Trump that understand how dangerous he is when the world is this dangerous. His chief of staff, John Kelly, said that he was the most flawed human being he'd ever met. And both of his secretaries of defense and his national security advisors said he should be nowhere near the White House. Now, the person closest to them, Donald Trump, said he's unfit for the highest office. That was Senator Vance. What we've seen out of Vice President Harris is we've seen steady leadership. We've seen a calmness that is able to draw on the coalitions to bring them together. Understanding that our allies matter. When our allies see Donald Trump turn towards Vladimir Putin, turn towards North Korea, when we start to see that type of fickleness around holding the coalitions together, we will stay committed. And as the Vice President said today we will protect our forces and our allied forces, and there will be consequences.
Governor, your time is up. Senator Vance, the same question. Would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran? You have 2 minutes.
So, Margaret, I want to answer the question. First of all, thanks, Governor. Thanks to CBS for hosting the debate. And thanks, most importantly, to the American people who are watching this evening and caring enough about this country to pay attention to this vice presidential debate. I want to answer the question, but I want to actually give an introduction to myself a little bit, because I recognize a lot of Americans don't know who either one of us are. I was raised in a working class family. My mother required food assistance for periods of her life. My grandmother required Social Security help to raise me, and she raised me in part because my own mother struggled with addiction for a big chunk of my early life. I went to college on the GI Bill after I enlisted in the Marine Corps and served in Iraq. And so I stand here asking to be your vice president with extraordinary gratitude for this country, for the American dream that made it possible for me to live my dreams. And most importantly, I know that a lot of you are worried about the chaos in the world and the feeling that the American dream is unattainable. I want to try to convince you tonight over the next 90 minutes that if we get better leadership in the White House, if we get Donald Trump back in the White House, the American dream is going to be attainable once again. Now, to answer this particular question, we have to remember that as much as Governor Walz just accused Donald Trump of being an agent of chaos, Donald Trump actually delivered stability in the world, and he did it by establishing effective deterrence. People were afraid of stepping out of line. Iran, which launched this attack, has received over $100 billion in unfrozen assets thanks to the Kamala Harris administration. What do they use that money for? They use it to buy weapons that they're now launching against our allies, and God forbid, potentially launching against the United States as well. Donald Trump recognized that for people to fear the United States, you needed peace through strength. They needed to recognize that if they got out of line, the United States global leadership would put stability and peace back in the world. Now, you asked about a preemptive strike, Margaret, and I want to answer the question. Look, it is up to Israel what they think they need to do to keep their country safe, and we should support our allies wherever they are when they're fighting the bad guys. I think that's the right approach to take with the Israel question.
Thank you, Senator. Governor Walz, do you care to respond to any of the allegations?
Well, look, Donald Trump was in office. We'll sometimes hear a revisionist history, but when Donald Trump was in office, it was Donald Trump who we had a coalition of nations that had boxed Iran's nuclear program in, the inability to advance it. Donald Trump pulled that program and put nothing else in its place. So Iran is closer to a nuclear weapon than they were before because of Donald Trump's fickle leadership. And when Iran shot down an American aircraft in international airspace, Donald Trump tweeted, because that's the standard diplomacy of Donald Trump. And when Iranian missiles did fall near U.S. troops and they received traumatic brain injuries, Donald Trump wrote it off as headaches. Look, our allies understand that Donald Trump is fickle. He will go to whoever has the most flattery or where it makes sense to him. Steady leadership like you witnessed today, like you witnessed in April. Both Iranian attacks were repelled. Our coalition is strong, and we need the steady leadership that Kamala Harris is providing.
Senator Vance, the U.S. did have a diplomatic deal with Iran to temporarily pause parts of its nuclear program, and President Trump did exit that deal. He recently said, just 5 days ago, the U.S. must now make a diplomatic deal with Iran because the consequences are impossible. Did he make a mistake? You have 1 minute.
Well, first of all, Margaret, diplomacy is not a dirty word, but I think that's something that Governor Walz just said is quite extraordinary. You yourself just said Iran is as close to a nuclear weapon today as they have ever been. And Governor Walz, you blame Donald Trump, who has been the vice president for the last 3.5 years. And the answer is your running mate, not mine. Donald Trump consistently made the world more secure. Now, we talk about the sequence of events that led us to where we are right now, and you can't ignore October the 7th, which I appreciate Governor Walz bringing up. But when did Iran and Hamas and their proxies attack Israel? It was during the administration of Kamala Harris. So Governor Walz can criticize Donald Trump's tweets, but effective, smart diplomacy and peace through strength is how you bring stability back to a very broken world. Donald Trump has already done it once before. Ask yourself at home, when was the last time, I'm 40 years old, when was the last time that an American president didn't have a major conflict break out? The only answer is during the 4 years that Donald Trump was president.
Gentlemen, we have a lot to get to. Nora?
Margaret, thank you. Let's turn now to Hurricane Helene. The storm could become one of the deadliest on record. More than 160 people are dead and hundreds more are missing. Scientists say climate change makes these hurricanes larger, stronger, and more deadly because of the historic rainfall. Senator Vance, according to CBS News polling, 7 in 10 Americans and more than 60% of Republicans under the age of 45 favor the U.S. taking steps to try and reduce climate change. Senator, what responsibility would the Trump administration have to try and reduce the impact of climate change? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Sure.
Good
so
question.
First of all, let's start with the hurricane because it's an unbelievable, unspeakable human tragedy. I just saw today actually a photograph of 2 grandparents on a roof with a 6-year-old child, and it was the last photograph ever taken of them because the roof collapsed and those innocent people lost their lives. And I'm sure Governor Walz joins me in saying our hearts go out to those innocent people, our prayers go out to them, and we want as robust and aggressive as a federal response as we can get to save as many lives as possible, and then, of course, afterwards, to help the people in those communities rebuild. I mean, these are communities that I love. Some of them I know very personally in Appalachia, all across the Southeast. They need their government to do their job, and I commit that when Donald Trump is president again, the government will put the citizens of this country first when they suffer from a disaster. Now, Nora, you asked about climate change. I think this is a very important issue. Look, a lot of people are justifiably worried about all these crazy weather patterns. I think it's important for us, first of all, to say Donald Trump and I support clean air, clean water. We want the environment to be cleaner and safer. But one of the things that I've noticed some of our Democratic friends talking a lot about is a concern about carbon emissions, this idea that carbon emissions drives all of the climate change. Well, let's just say that's true, just for the sake of argument, so we're not arguing about weird science. Let's just say that's true. Well, if you believe that, what would you want to do? The answer is that you'd want to reshore as much American manufacturing as possible, and you'd want to produce as much energy as possible in the United States of America because we're the cleanest economy in the entire world. What have Kamala Harris's policies actually led to? More energy production in China, more manufacturing overseas, more doing business in some of the dirtiest parts of the entire world. And when I say that, I mean the amount of carbon emissions they're doing per unit of economic output. So if we actually care about getting cleaner air and cleaner water, the best thing to do is to double down and invest in American workers and the American people. And unfortunately, Kamala Harris has done exactly the opposite.
Governor Walz, you have 2 minutes to respond.
We got close to an agreement because all those things are happening. Look, first of all, it is a horrific tragedy with this hurricane. And my heart goes out to the folks that are down there in contact with the governors. I serve as co-chair of the Council of Governors as we work together on these emergency managements. Governors know no partisanship. They work together. So all of the governors and the emergency responders are on the ground. Those happen on the front end. The federal government comes in, makes sure they're there to that we recover. But we're still in that phase where we need to make sure that they're staying there, staying focused. Now, look, coming back to the climate change issue, there's no doubt this thing roared onto the scene faster and stronger than anything we've seen. Senator Vance has said that there's a climate problem in the past. Donald Trump called it a hoax. and then joke
Thank
that
you.
these things would make more beachfront property to be able to invest in.
Thank you.
What we've seen out of the Harris administration now, the Biden-Harris administration, is we've seen this investment. We've seen massive investments, the biggest in global history that we've seen in the Inflation Reduction Act, has created jobs all across the country. 2,000 in Jeffersonville, Ohio, taking the EV technology that we invented and making it here. 200,000 jobs across the country. The largest solar manufacturing plant in North America sits in Minnesota. But my farmers know climate change is real. They've seen 500-year droughts, 500-year floods back to back. But what they're doing is adapting, and this has allowed them to tell me, look, I harvest corn, I harvest soybean, and I harvest wind. We are producing more natural gas and more oil at any time than we ever have. We're also producing more clean energy. So the solution for us is to continue to move forward, that climate change is real. Reducing our impact is absolutely critical, but this is not a false choice. You can do that at the same time you're creating the jobs that we're seeing all across the country. That's exactly what this administration has done. We are seeing us becoming an energy superpower for the future, not just the current. And that's what absolutely makes sense. And then we start thinking about how do we mitigate these disasters.
Thank you. Senator,
Wow,
I want to give you an opportunity to respond there. The governor mentioned that President Trump has called climate change a hoax. Do you agree?
Well, look, what the president has said is that if the Democrats, in particular Kamala Harris and her leadership, if they really believe that climate change is serious, what they would be doing is more manufacturing and more energy production in the United States of America, and that's not what they're doing. So clearly, Kamala Harris herself doesn't believe her own rhetoric on this. If she did, she would actually agree with Donald Trump's energy policies. Now, something Governor Walz said I think is important to touch upon, because when we talk about clean energy, I think that's a slogan that often the Democrats will use here. And I'm talking, of course, about the Democratic leadership. And the real issue is that if you're spending hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars of American taxpayer money on solar panels that are made in China, number one, you're going to make the economy dirtier. We should be making more of those solar panels here in the United States of America. Some of them are, Tim, but a lot of them are being made overseas in China, especially the components that go into those solar panels. So if you really want to make the environment cleaner, you've got to invest in more energy production. We haven't built a nuclear facility, I think, one in the past 40 years.
Senator.
Natural gas, we got to invest more in it. Kamala Harris has done the opposite. That's raised energy prices and also meant that we're doing worse by the climate.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, would you like to respond?
Well, look, we're producing more natural gas than we ever have. There's no moratorium on that. We're producing more oil. But the folks know, and like I said again, these are not liberal folks. These are not folks that are Green New Deal folks. These are farmers that have been drought one year, massive flooding the next year. They understand that it makes sense. Look, our #1 export cannot be topsoil from erosion from these massive storms. We saw it in Minnesota this summer. And thinking about how do we respond to that, we're thinking ahead on this. And what Kamala Harris has been able to do in Minnesota, we're starting to weatherproof some of these things. The infrastructure law that was passed allows us to think about mitigation in the future. How do we make sure that we're protecting by burying our power lines? How do we make sure that we're protecting lakefronts and things that we're seeing more and more of? But to call it a hoax and to take the oil company executives to Mar-a-Lago, say, give me money for my campaign, and I'll let you do whatever you want. We can be smarter about that, and an all-above energy policy is exactly what she's doing, creating those jobs right here.
Governor, your time is up. The overwhelming consensus among scientists is that the Earth's climate is warming at an unprecedented rate. Margaret?
Thank you, Nora. We're going to turn now to immigration. The crisis at the U.S.-Mexico border consistently ranks as one of the top issues for American voters. Senator Vance, your campaign is pledging to carry out the largest mass deportation plan in American history and to use the U.S. military to do so. Could you be more specific about exactly how this will work? For example, would you deport parents who have entered the U.S. illegally and separate them from any of their children who were born on U.S. soil? You have 2 minutes.
So first of all, Margaret, before we talk about deportations, we have to stop the bleeding. We have a historic immigration crisis because Kamala Harris started and said that she wanted to undo all of Donald Trump's border policies. 94 executive orders suspending deportations, decriminalizing illegal aliens, massively increasing the asylum fraud that exists in our system. That has opened the floodgates. And what it's meant is that a lot of fentanyl is coming into our country. I had a mother who struggled with opioid addiction and has gotten clean. I don't want people who are struggling with addiction to be deprived of their second chance because Kamala Harris let in fentanyl into our communities at record levels. So you've got to stop the bleeding. You've got to re-implement Donald Trump's border policies, build the wall, re-implement deportations. And that gets me to your point, Margaret, about what do we actually do? So we've got 25 million illegal aliens who are here in the country. What do we do with them? I think the first thing that we do is we start with the criminal migrants. About 1 million of those people have committed some form of crime in addition to crossing the border illegally. I think you start with deportations on those folks. And then I think you make it harder for illegal aliens to undercut the wages of American workers. A lot of people will go home if they can't work for less than minimum wage in our own country. And by the way, that'll be really good for our workers who just want to earn a fair wage for doing a good day's work. And the final point, Margaret, is you ask about family separation. Right now in this country, Margaret, we have 320,000 children that the Department of Homeland Security has effectively lost. Some of them have been sex trafficked. Some of them hopefully are at homes with their families. Some of them have been used as drug trafficking mules. The real family separation policy in this country is unfortunately Kamala Harris's wide open southern border. And I'd ask my fellow Americans to remember when she came into office, she said she was going to do this. Real leadership would be saying, you know what, I screwed up. We're going to go back to Donald Trump's border policies. I wish that she would do that. It would be good for all of us.
Governor, do you care to respond to any of those specific allegations, including that the vice president is, quote, letting in fentanyl and using kids as drug mules, among other things regarding children?
The drug mule is not true, but I will say about this, about the fentanyl, because this is a crisis of this, the opioid crisis. And the good news on this is the last 12 months saw the largest decrease in opioid deaths in our nation's history, 30% decrease in Ohio. But there's still more work to do. But let's go back to this on immigration. Kamala Harris was the Attorney General of the largest state and a border state in California. She's the only person in this race who prosecuted transnational gangs for human trafficking and drug interventions. But look, we all want to solve this. Most of us want to solve this, and that is the United States Congress. That's the Border Patrol agents. That's the Chamber of Commerce. That's most Americans out here. That's why we had the fairest and the toughest bill on immigration that this nation's seen. It was crafted by a conservative senator from Oklahoma, James Lankford. I know him. He's super conservative, but he's a man of principle, wants to get it done. Democrats and Republicans worked on this piece of legislation. The Border Patrol said, this is what we need in here. These are the experts. And the Chamber of Commerce and the Wall Street Journal said, pass this thing. Kamala Harris helped get there. 1,500 new border agents, detection for drugs, DOJ money to speed up these the adjudications on this, just what America wants. But as soon as I was getting ready to pass and actually tackle this, Donald Trump said no, told them to vote against it because it gives him a campaign issue. It gives him to, what would Donald Trump talk about if we actually did some of these things? And they need to be done by the legislature. You can't just do this through the executive branch. So look, we have the options to do this. Donald Trump had 4 years. He had 4 years to do this. And he promised you, America, how easy it would be. I'll build you a big, beautiful wall, and Mexico will pay for it. Less than 2% of that wall got built, and Mexico didn't pay a dime. But here we are again, 9 years after he came down that escalator, dehumanizing people and telling them what he was going to do. As far as the deportation plan, at one point, Senator Vance said it was so unworkable to be laughable. So that's where we're at. Pass the bill, she'll sign it.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, the question was, will you separate parents from their children, even if their kids are U.S. citizens? You have 1 minute.
Margaret, my point is that we already have massive child separations thanks to Kamala Harris's open border. And I didn't accuse Kamala Harris of inviting drug mules. I said that she enabled the Mexican drug cartels to operate freely in this country. And we know that they use children as drug mules, and it is a disgrace, and it has to stop. Look, I think what Tim said just doesn't pass the smell test. For 3 years, Kamala Harris went out bragging that she was going to undo Donald Trump's border policy. She did exactly that. We had a record number of illegal crossings. We had a record number of fentanyl coming into our country. And now that she's running for president, or a few months before, she says that somehow she got religion and cared a lot about a piece of legislation. The only thing that she did when she became the vice president, when she became the appointed border czar, was to undo 94 Donald Trump executive actions that opened the border. This problem is leading to massive problems in the United States of America. Parents who can't afford health care, schools schools that are overwhelmed. It's got to stop, and it will when Donald Trump is president again.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, what about our CBS News polling, which does show that a majority of Americans, more than 50%, support mass deportations?
Look, we fix this issue with a bill that is necessary, but the issue on this is what happens when you don't want to solve it. You demonize it. And we saw this. And Senator Vance, and it surprises me on this, talking about and saying, I will create stories to bring attention to this. That vilified a large number of people who were here legally in the community of Springfield. The Republican governor said, it's not true. Don't do it. There's consequences for this. There's consequences. We could come together. Senator Langford did it. We could come together and solve this if we didn't let Donald Trump continue to make it an issue. And the consequences in Springfield were the governor had to send state law enforcement to escort kindergartners to school. I believe Senator Vance wants to solve this, but by standing with Donald Trump and not working together to find a solution, it becomes a talking point. And when it becomes a talking point like this, we dehumanize and villainize other human beings.
Yes.
Tim.
Governor,
Yes.
Governor, your time is up. Senator,
love
I'll give
that.
you 1 minute, but let me just ask you the question first. The governor has made the point, and I think as a sitting lawmaker, you know that Congress controls the purse strings and any funding. So you have said repeatedly that Donald Trump would, through executive action, solve this. Do you disagree that Congress controls the purse strings and would need to support many of the changes that you would actually want to implement? You have 1 minute.
Look, Margaret, first of all, the gross majority of what we need to do at the southern border is just empowering law enforcement to do their job. I've been to the southern border more than our borders are. Kamala Harris has been, and it's actually heartbreaking because the Border Patrol agents, they just want to be empowered to do their job. Of course, additional resources would help, but most of this is about the president and the vice president empowering our law enforcement to say, if you try to come across the border illegally, you've got to stay in Mexico, you've got to go back through proper channels. Now, Governor Walz brought up the community of Springfield, and he's very worried about the things that I've said in Springfield. Look, in Springfield, Ohio, and in communities all across this country, you've got schools that are overwhelmed. You've got hospitals that are overwhelmed. You have got housing that is totally unaffordable because we brought in millions of illegal immigrants to compete with Americans for scarce homes. The people that I'm most worried about in Springfield, Ohio, are the American citizens who have had their lives destroyed by Kamala Harris's open border. It is a disgrace, Tim. And I actually think, I agree with you. I think you want to solve this problem, but I don't think that Kamala Harris does.
Senator, your time is
Shame
up.
on
Governor,
you.
you have 1 minute to
Liar.
respond.
Yeah, well, it is law enforcement that asked for the bill. They helped craft it. They're the ones that supported it. That's because they know we need to do this. Look, this issue of continuing to bring this up, of not dealing with it, of blaming migrants for everything. On housing, we could talk a little bit about Wall Street speculators buying up housing and making them less affordable. But it becomes a blame. Look, this bill also gives the money necessary to adjudicate. I agree. It should not take 7 years for an asylum claim to be done. This bill gets it done in 90 days. Then you start to make a difference in this, and you start to adhere to what we know, American principles. I don't talk about my faith a lot, but Matthew 25:40 talks about, to the least amongst us you do unto me. I think that's true of most Americans. They simply want order to it. This bill does it. It's funded. It's supported by the people who do it, and it lets us keep our dignity about how we treat other people.
Thank you, Governor. And just to clarify for our viewers, Springfield, Ohio does have a large number of Haitian migrants who have legal status, temporary protected status.
Well, Margaret, but
thank you, Senator. We have so much to get to.
Margaret, I think it's important because
we're going to turn out of the economy. Thank
Margaret,
you.
the rules were that you guys weren't going to fact check, and since you're fact checking me, I think it's important to say what's actually going on.
Moderators
so there's an
trying to gain
application called the
control.
CBP One app, where you can go on as an illegal migrant, apply for asylum or apply for parole, and be granted legal status at the wave of a Kamala Harris open border wand. That is not a person coming in, applying for a green card and waiting for 10 years. That is the facilitation of illegal immigration, Margaret.
No, it's legal.
Thank you, Senator, for describing the legal process. We have so much to get to, Senator.
Those laws have been on the books since 1990.
Thank you, gentlemen.
The
we want to
CBP
have
One app has not been on the books since 1990. It's something that Kamala Harris created, Margaret.
Gentlemen,
muted.
The audience can't hear you because your mics are cut. We have so much we want to get to. Thank you for explaining the legal process. Nora.
Thank you, Margaret. The economy is a top concern for voters. Each of your campaigns has released an economic plan, so let's talk about the specifics. Governor Walz, Vice President Harris unveiled a plan that includes billions in tax credits for manufacturing, housing, and a renewed child tax credit. The Wharton School says your proposals will increase the nation's deficit by $1.2 trillion. How would you pay for that without ballooning the deficit? Governor, I'll give you 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. And Kamala Harris and I do believe in the middle class because that's where we come from. We both grew up in that. We understand. So those of you out there listening tonight, you're hearing a lot of stuff back and forth, and it's good. It's healthy. That's what this is supposed to happen. You should be listening. How's this going to impact me? The bold forward plan that Kamala Harris put out there is talking about this housing issue. The one thing is there's 3 million new houses proposed under this plan with down payment assistance on the front end to get you in a house. A house is much more than just an asset to be traded somewhere. It's foundational to where you're at. And then making sure that the things you buy every day, whether they be prescription drugs or other things, that there's fairness in that. Look, the $35 insulin is a good thing, but it costs $5 to make insulin. They were charging $800 before this law went into effect. As far as the housing goes, I've seen it in Minnesota. 12% more houses in Minneapolis, prices went down on rent 4%. It's working. And then making sure tax cuts go to the middle class. $6,000 child tax credit, we have one in Minnesota, reduces childhood poverty by 1/3. We save money in the long run, and we do the right thing for families. And then getting businesses off the ground. The law as it stands right now is $5,000 tax credit for small business, increasing that to $50,000. Now, this is a philosophical difference between us. Donald Trump made a promise, and I'll give you this. He kept it. He took folks to Mar-a-Lago, said, you're rich as hell, I'm going to give you a tax cut. He gave the tax cuts that predominantly went to the top class. What happened there was an $8 trillion increase in the national debt, the largest ever. Now he's proposing a 20% consumption or sales tax on everything we bring in. Everyone agrees, including businesses, it would be destabilizing it, it would increase inflation and potentially lead to a recession. Look, this is simple for you. Where are we going? Kamala Harris has said to do the things she wants to do, we'll just ask the wealthiest to pay their fair share. When you do that, our system works best, more people are participating in it, and folks have the things that they need.
Senator, I want to give you a moment to respond on that. But similarly, the Wharton School has done an analysis of the Trump plan and says it would increase the nation's deficit by $5.8 trillion. My question is the same for you. How do you pay for all that without ballooning the deficit? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, you're going to hear a lot from Tim Walz this evening, and you just heard it in the answer, a lot of what Kamala Harris proposes to do. And some of it, I'll be honest with you, it even sounds pretty good. Here's what you won't hear, is that Kamala Harris has already done it. Because she's been the vice president for 3.5 years. She had the opportunity to enact all of these great policies. And what she's actually done instead is drive the cost of food higher by 25%, drive the cost of housing higher by about 60%. Open the American southern border and make middle-class life unaffordable for a large number of Americans. If Kamala Harris has such great plans for how to address middle-class problems, then she ought to do them now. Not when asking for a promotion, but in the job the American people gave her 3.5 years ago. And the fact that she isn't tells you a lot about how much you can trust her actual plans. Now, Donald Trump's economic plan is not just a plan, but it's also a record. A lot of those same economists attack Donald Trump's plans, and they have PhDs, but they don't have common sense and they don't have wisdom. Because Donald Trump's economic policies delivered the highest take-home pay in a generation in this country, 1.5% inflation, and to boot, peace and security all over the world. So when people say that Donald Trump's economic plan doesn't make sense, I say look at the record. He delivered rising take-home pay for American workers. Now, Tim admirably admits that they want to undo the Trump tax cuts. But if you look at what was so different about Donald Trump's tax cuts, even from previous Republican tax cut plans, is that a lot of those resources went to giving more take-home pay to middle-class and working-class Americans. It was passed in 2017, and you saw an American economic boom unlike we've seen in a generation in this country. That is a record that I'm proud to run on, and we're going to get back to that common sense wisdom so that you can afford to live the American dream again. I know a lot of you are struggling. I know a lot of you are worried about paying the bills. It's going to stop when Donald Trump brings back common sense to this country.
Governor, do you want to respond to that? What has Kamala Harris done for the middle class?
Yeah, well, Kamala Harris's day one was Donald Trump's failure on COVID that led to the collapse of our economy. We were already before COVID in a manufacturing recession, but 10 million people out of work, largest percentage since the Great Depression. 9 million jobs closed on that. That was day one.
COVID
whether it was
part
the
of that,
Infrastructure
though.
Act or
Wasn't
other
just on
things
Trump.
removed. Now, you made a question about
It's not a
experts
great
said this.
talking point.
I've made a note of this. Economists can't be trusted. Science can't be trusted. National security folks can't be trusted. Look, if you're going to be president, you don't have all the answers. Donald Trump believes he does. My pro tip of the day is this. If you need heart surgery, listen to the people at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, not Donald Trump. And the same thing goes with this. And I ask you out there, teachers, nurses, truck drivers, or whatever, how is it fair that you're paying your taxes every year and Donald Trump hasn't paid any federal tax in the last 15 years, in the last year as president? That's what's wrong with the system. There's a way around it, and he's bragged about that. We're just asking for fairness in it, and that's all you want.
You have a minute.
He sounds
Governor,
so
you say
reasonable.
trust the experts. But those same experts for 40 years said that if we shipped our manufacturing base off to China, we'd get cheaper goods. They lied about that. They said if we shipped our industrial base off to other countries, to Mexico and elsewhere, it would make the middle class stronger. They were wrong about that. They were wrong about the idea that if we made America less self-reliant, less productive in our own nation, that it would somehow make us better off, and they were wrong about it. And for the first time in a generation, Donald Trump had the wisdom and the courage to say to that bipartisan consensus, we're not doing it anymore. We're bringing American manufacturing back. We're unleashing American energy. We're going to make more of our own stuff. And this isn't just an economic issue. I mean, I've got 3 beautiful little kids at home, 7, 4, and 2, and I love them very much, and I hope they're in bed right now. But look, so many of the drugs, the pharmaceuticals that we put in the bodies of our children are manufactured by nations that hate us. This has to stop, and we're not going to stop it by listening to experts. We're going to stop it by listening to common sense wisdom, which is what Donald Trump governed on.
Senator, your time is up.
I also
Walz,
try
can
to
you
make a
address that?
joke
I mean,
there.
voters say they trust Donald Trump on the economy more. Why?
Well, if you're listening tonight and you want billionaires to get tax cuts, you heard what the numbers were. Look, I'm a union guy on this. I'm not a guy who wanted to ship things overseas, but I understand that, look, we produce soybeans and corn. We need to have fair trading partners. That's something that we believe in. I think the thing that most concerns me on this is Donald Trump was the guy who created the largest trade deficit in American history with China. So the rhetoric is good. Much of what the senator said right there, I'm in agreement with him on this. I watched it happen too. I watched it to my communities, and we talked about that. But we had people undercutting the right to collectively bargain. We had right to work states made it more difficult. We had companies that were willing to ship it over, and we saw people profit. Folks that are venture capital in some cases, putting money into companies that were overseas. We're in agreement that we bring those home. The issue is Donald Trump is talking about it. Kamala Harris has a record, 250,000 more manufacturing jobs just out of the IRA.
May I respond to that?
Yes.
So appreciate that. So if you notice, what Governor Walz just did is he said, first of all, Donald Trump has to listen to the experts. And then when he acknowledged that the experts screwed up, he said, well, Donald Trump didn't do nearly as good of a job as the statistics show that he did. So what Tim Walz is doing, and I honestly, Tim, I think you got a tough job here, because you've got to play whack-a-mole. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver rising take-home pay, which of course he did. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver lower inflation, which of course he did. And then you've simultaneously got to defend Kamala Harris's atrocious economic record, which has made gas, groceries, and housing unaffordable for American citizens. I was raised by a woman who would sometimes go into medical debt so that she could put food on the table in our household. I know what it's like to not be able to afford the things that you need to afford. We can do so much better. To all of you watching, we can get back to an America that's affordable again. We just got to get back to common sense economic principles.
I hope we have a conversation on health care then.
Senator, Governor.
Yes,
thank you. Margaret?
We have a lot to get to ahead, gentlemen, on many topics. But right now, I want to talk about personal qualifications. The vice president is often the last voice the president hears before making consequential decisions. We want to ask you about your leadership qualities. Governor Walz, you said you were in Hong Kong during the deadly Tiananmen Square protests in the spring of 1989. But Minnesota Public Radio and other media outlets are reporting that you actually didn't travel to Asia until August of that year. Can you explain that discrepancy?
Yeah, well, and to the folks out there who didn't get at the top of this, look, I grew up in small rural Nebraska, town of 400, town that you rode your bike with your buddies till the streetlights come on, and I'm proud of that service. I joined the National Guard at 17, worked on family farms, and then I used the GI Bill to become a teacher, passionate about it, a young teacher. My first year out, I got the opportunity in the summer of '89 to travel to China. 35 years ago, be able to do that. I came back home and then started a program to take young people there. We would take basketball teams, we would take baseball teams, we would take dancers, and we would go back and forth to China. The issue for that was to try and learn. Now look, my community knows who I am. They saw where I was at. Look, I will be the first to tell you, I have poured my heart into my community. I've tried to do the best I can, but I've not been perfect. And I'm a knucklehead at times, but it's always been about that. Those same people elected me to Congress for 12 years. And in Congress, I was one of the most bipartisan people, working on things like farm bills that we got done, working on veterans benefits. And then the people of Minnesota were able to elect me to governor twice. So look, my commitment has been from the beginning to make sure that I'm there for the people, to make sure that I get this right. I will say more than anything, many times I will talk a lot. I will get caught up in the rhetoric. But being there, the impact it made, the difference it made in my life, I learned a lot about China. I hear the critiques of this. I would make the case that Donald Trump should have come on one of those trips with us. I guarantee you he wouldn't be praising Xi Jinping about COVID. And I guarantee you he wouldn't start a trade war that he ends up losing. So this is about trying to understand the world. It's about trying to do the best you can for your community. And then it's putting yourself out there and letting your folks understand what it is. My commitment, whether it be through teaching, which I was good at, or whether it was being a good soldier or was being a good member of Congress, those are the things that I think are the values that people care about.
Governor, just to follow up on that, the question was, can you explain the discrepancy?
All I said on this was I got there that summer and misspoke on this. So I will just, that's what I've said. So I was in Hong Kong and China during the democracy protests went in. And from that, I learned a lot of what needed to be in governance.
He's flailing now.
Thank you, Governor. Senator Vance, in 2016, you called your running mate Donald Trump unfit for the nation's highest office, and you said he could be America's Hitler. I know you've been asked many times, and you've said you regret those comments and explained you then voted for Donald Trump in 2020. But the Washington Post reported new messages last week in which you also disparaged Trump's economic record while he was president, writing to someone in 2020, quote, Trump thoroughly failed to deliver his economic populism. You're now his running mate, and you've shifted many of your policy stances to align with his. If you become vice president, why should Americans trust that you will give Donald Trump the advice he needs to hear and not just the advice he wants to hear? You have 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, Margaret, because I've always been open. And sometimes, of course, I've disagreed with the president, but I've also been extremely open about the fact that I was wrong about Donald Trump. I was wrong, first of all, because I believed some of the media stories that turned out to be dishonest fabrications of his record. But most importantly, Donald Trump delivered for the American people. Rising wages, rising take-home pay, an economy that worked for normal Americans, a secure southern border, a lot of things, frankly, that I didn't think he'd be able to deliver on. And yeah, when you screw up, when you misspeak, when you get something wrong and you change your mind, you ought to be honest with the American people about it. It's one of the reasons, Margaret, why I've done so many interviews is because I think it's important to actually explain to the American people where I come down on the issues and what changed. Now, you pointed out to messages from 2020. Margaret, I've been extremely consistent that I think there were a lot of things that we could have done better in the Trump administration the first round if Congress was doing its job. I strongly believe, and I've been a United States Senator, that Congress is not just a high-class debating society. It's not just a forum for senators and congressmen to whine about problems. It's a forum to govern. So there were a lot of things on the border, on tariffs, for example, where I think that we could have done so much more if the Republican Congress and the Democrats in Congress had been a little bit better about how they govern the country. They were so obsessed with impeaching Donald Trump, they couldn't actually govern. And I want to talk about this tariff issue in particular, Margaret, because Tim just accused this of being a national sales tax. Look, the one thing, and you're not, probably surprised to hear me praising Joe Biden, but the one thing that Joe Biden did is he continued some of the Trump tariffs that protected American manufacturing jobs. And it's the one issue, the most pro-worker part of the Biden administration, it's the one issue where Kamala Harris has run away from Joe Biden's record. Think about this. If you're trying to employ slave laborers in China at $3 a day, you're going to do that and undercut the wages of American workers unless our country stands up for itself and says, you're not accessing our markets unless you're paying middle-class Americans a fair wage.
Senator, your time is up. Nora?
Thank you. Now to the issue of reproductive rights. Governor Walz, after Roe versus Wade was overturned, you signed a bill into law that made Minnesota one of the least restrictive states in the nation when it comes to abortion. Former President Trump said in the last debate that you believe abortion, quote, in the 9th month is absolutely fine. Yes or no? Is that what you support? I'll give you 2 minutes.
That's not what the bill says, but look, this issue is what's on everyone's mind. Donald Trump put this all into motion. He brags about how great it was that he put the judges in and overturned Roe versus Wade, 52 years of personal autonomy. And then he tells us, oh, we send it to the states. It's a beautiful thing. Amanda Zaworski would disagree with you on it's a beautiful thing. A young bride in Texas waiting for their child at 18 weeks. She has a complication, a tear in the membrane. She needs to go in. The medical care at that point needs to be decided by the doctor. And that would have been an abortion. But in Texas, that would have put them in legal jeopardy. She went home, got sepsis, nearly dies, and now she may have difficulty having children. Or in Kentucky, Hadley Duvall, a 12-year-old child raped and impregnated by her stepfather. Those are horrific. Now, when God asked about that, Senator Vance said 2 wrongs don't make a right. There is no right in this. So in Minnesota, what we did was restore Roe versus Wade. We made sure that we put women in charge of their health care. But look, this is not where, if you don't know Amanda or a Hadley, you soon will. Their Project 2025 is going to have a registry of pregnancies.
Project 2025.
It's going to get more difficult, if not impossible, to get contraception and limit access, if not eliminate access to infertility treatments. For so many of you out there listening, me included, infertility treatments are why I have a child.
Yep.
That's nobody else's business, but those things are being proposed. And the catch-all on this is, well, the states will decide what's right for Texas might not be right for Washington. That's not how this works. This is basic human right. We have seen maternal mortality skyrocket in Texas, outpacing many other countries in the world.
Yes.
This is about health care. In Minnesota, we are ranked first in health care for a reason. We trust women. We trust doctors.
Senator, do you want to respond to the governor's claim? Will you create a federal pregnancy monitoring agency?
No, Nora, certainly we won't. And I want to talk about this issue because I know a lot of Americans care about it, and I know a lot of Americans don't agree with everything that I've ever said on this topic. And, you know, I grew up in a working class family in a neighborhood where I knew a lot of young women who had unplanned pregnancies and decided to terminate those pregnancies because they feel like they didn't have any other options. And, you know, one of them is actually very dear to me. And I know she's watching tonight, and I love you. And she told me something a couple years ago that she felt like if she hadn't had that abortion, that it would have destroyed her life because she was in an abusive relationship. And I think that what I take from that as a Republican who proudly wants to protect innocent life in this country, who proudly wants to protect the vulnerable, is that my party, we've got to do so much better of a job at earning the American people's trust back on this issue where they frankly just don't trust us. And I think that's one of the things that Donald Trump and I are endeavoring to do. I want us as a Republican Party to be pro-family in the fullest sense of the word. I want us to support fertility treatments. I want us to make it easier for moms to afford to have babies. I want it to make it easier for young families to afford a home so they can afford a place to raise that family. And I think there's so much that we can do on the public policy front just to give women more options. Now, of course, Donald Trump has been very clear that on the abortion policy specifically, that we have a big country and it's diverse. And California has a different viewpoint on this than Georgia. Georgia has a different viewpoint from Arizona. And the proper way to handle this, as messy as democracy sometimes is to let voters make these decisions. Let the individual states make their abortion policy. And I think that's what makes the most sense in a very big, a very diverse, and let's be honest, sometimes a very, very messy and divided country.
Governor, would you like to respond and also answer the question about restrictions?
Yeah, well, the question got asked, and Donald Trump made the accusation that wasn't true about Minnesota. Well, let me tell you about this idea that there's diverse states. There's a young woman named Amber Thurman. She happened to be in Georgia, a restrictive state. Because of that, she had to travel a long distance to North Carolina to try and get her care. Amber Thurman died in that journey back and forth. The fact of the matter is, how can we as a nation say that your life and your rights, as basic as the right to control your own body, is determined on geography? There's a very real chance, had Amber Thurman lived in Minnesota, she would be alive today. That's why the restoration of Roe versus Wade. When you listen to Vice President Harris talk about this subject and you hear me talk about it, you hear us talking exactly the same. Donald Trump is trying to figure out how to get the political right of this. I agree with a lot of what Senator Vance said about what's happening. His running mate, though, does not, and that's the problem.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, let me ask you about that. He mentioned, was, I think, referring to a national ban. In the past, you have supported a federal ban on abortion after 15 weeks. In fact, you said if someone can't support legislation like that, quote, you are making the United States the most barbaric pro-abortion regime anywhere in the entire world. My question is, why have you changed your position?
Well, Nora, first of all, I never supported a national ban. I did when I was running for Senate in 2022 talk about setting some minimum national standard. For example, we have a partial birth abortion ban in place in this country at the federal level. I don't think anybody's trying to get rid of that, or at least I hope not, though I know that Democrats have taken a very radical pro-abortion stance. But Nora, you know, one of the things that changed is in the state of Ohio, we had a referendum in 2023, and the people of Ohio voted overwhelmingly, by the way, against my position. And I think that what I learned from that, Nora, is that we've got to do a better job at winning back people's trust. So many young women would love to have families. So many young women also see an unplanned pregnancy as something that's going to destroy their livelihood, destroy their education, destroy their relationships. And we have got to earn people's trust back. And that's why Donald Trump and I are committed to pursuing pro-family policies, making childcare more accessible, making fertility treatments more accessible, because we've got to do a better job at that. And that's what real leadership is.
Governor, your response.
I'm going to respond on the pro-abortion piece of that. No, we're not. We're pro-women. We're pro-freedom to make your own choice. We know what the implications are to not be that. Women having miscarriages, women not getting the care, physicians feeling like they may be prosecuted for providing that care. And as far as making sure that we're educating our children and giving them options, Minnesota's a state with one of the lowest teen pregnancy rates. We understand that, too. We know that the options need to be available, and we make that true. We also make it, we're a top 3 state for the best place to raise children. But these two things, to try and say that we're pro-children, but we don't like this, or you guys are pro-abortion, that's not the case at all. We are pro-freedoms for women to make their choices, and we're going, and Kamala Harris is making the case, to make options for children more affordable, a $6,000 child tax credit, but we're not going to base that on the backs of making someone like Amber Thurman drive 600 miles to try and get health care.
Senator?
May I respond to that? First of all, Governor, I agree with you. Amber Thurman should still be alive, and there are a lot of people who should still be alive, and I certainly wish that she was.
Big
and
concession.
Maybe you're free to disagree with me on this and explain this to me, but as I read the Minnesota law that you signed into law, the statute that you signed into law, it says that a doctor who presides over an abortion where the baby survives, the doctor is under no obligation to provide life-saving care to a baby who survives a botched late-term abortion. That is, I think, whether you're pro-choice or pro-abortion, that is fundamentally barbaric. And that's why I use that word, Nora, is because some of what we've seen, do you want to force Catholic hospitals to perform abortions against their will? Because Kamala Harris has supported suing Catholic nuns to violate their freedom of conscience. We can be a big and diverse country where we respect people's freedom of conscience and make the country more pro-baby and pro-family. But please.
JD is so
Governor,
moderate
please respond.
Look, this is one where there's always something there. This is a very simple proposition. These are women's decisions to make about their healthcare decisions, and the physicians who know best when they need to do this. Trying to distort the way a law is written to try and make a point. That's not it at all.
What was I wrong about, Governor? Please tell me. What was I wrong about?
That is not the way the law is written. Look, I've given
But
this,
how?
I've given this advice on a lot of things, that getting involved, getting engaged, that's been misread, and it was fact-checked at the last debate. But the point on this is there's a continuation of these guys to try and tell women or to get involved. I use this line on this, just mind your own business. On this. Things worked best when Roe versus Wade was in place.
Yep.
When we do a restoration of Roe, that works best. That doesn't preclude us from increasing funding for children. It doesn't increase us from making sure that once that child's born, like in Minnesota, they get meals, they get early childhood education, they get health care. So the hiding behind we're going to do all these other things when you're not proposing them in your budget. Kamala Harris is proposing them. She's proposing all those things to make life easier for families.
I asked a specific question, Governor. You gave me a slogan as a response.
It's not the case. It's not true. That's not what the law says. So they fact-checked it with President Trump.
Gentlemen, there's a lot to discuss. We have to move on, and we're going to be right back with
right,
much more
break
of the
time. Wow.
vice presidential debate in just a moment.
Wow.
I think we also got abortion after birth there. That was pretty much what Vance was saying, right?
Wow.
For the bingo?
Sorry, Sarah. I'm kind of blocking your view here. Do you? Okay, you're good. All right. Sarah's good, everyone. It's okay. She's where are you? There. I can't do it right. There you are. Wow, friends. I have a lot of thoughts, April. I want to get to your thoughts as well. My quick thoughts on this debate so far is, I gotta say, way different than I expected, and both of them are really well spoken overall. And this feels, dare I say, like an old school Obama-Romney kind of debate feel. There's been some even mutual respect given by both sides. I will say the thing about JD Vance for me is that because I know that he hangs out with the authors of Project 2025, because I know he hangs out with people like Lance Wallnau, who is the architect behind the 7 Mountain Mandate and the Christian Nationalist move to take over the country, I don't trust anything JD Vance says about anything, especially abortion. Because he knows that abortion is not popular, or that most Americans do not agree with their take on abortion. So I think he's playing to that audience. But behind the scenes, I think JD fully embraces a Project 2025, we have to ban all abortions everywhere kind of ethic. So that's my only thought on that. But I would just love, April, some of your big picture thoughts on this debate so far.
I think overall they're both doing pretty well. I mean, JD Vance seems they're both cordial towards each other. And there's something really refreshing about that. Like,
I know. Shocking.
This is feeling old school debate. Both have dodged questions. I do wish that I wish that Tim Walz would have addressed the 9-month thing, because that is what what people that are on the fence, especially like one issue voters, are. I wish he just would have said, no, that's not happening, or explain this is what happens. This is what the bill actually says, instead of just kind of shutting it down. But then also JD Vance also dodged a bunch of questions and
totally
didn't give a straight answer on abortion either. Like, I don't think they're not.
And I will say that Tim's answer about where he was in China in like the 80s, really disappointing. I don't know if he got nervous, but like all he had to say was, I misspoke and I was wrong. And then we just kind of move on. But instead, he kind of found himself in like this spiral of, oh my gosh, I'm in too deep. I have to kind of try and save it. And instead, it crashed and burned. So, but again, I mean, that wasn't about policy. That was about something in his personal life of like where he was at any given time, whatever. But it still wasn't a great look. But yeah, I mean, I'm with you, April. I am. It's weird that I'm saying what a refreshing debate, because they've both. I mean, Tim has done a good job of saying, we don't dehumanize. He cited his faith. That was a huge. I'm like, yes, I love hearing that. But yeah, it's been interesting so far. I gotta be honest. Like it's been an interesting debate, and I've enjoyed it more than I expected to be frank with you.
Yeah, and I think Tim Walz. I want him to really look at JD Vance and be like, does anyone in the Republican Party credit Mike Pence for anything Trump did when he was president?
Right.
Like, I just want them to say that, because they don't. They give Mike Pence zero credit. Like, which I understand. Exactly. That's what the Trump campaign has to do, because their whole plan was to go after Biden, and so now they're trying to tie
Right.
You know, and Harris is partly to blame. She is part of the administration. But, you know, if you've ever watched Veep, you know the vice president doesn't have much power at all.
Yes, 100%, 100%.
But yeah, where are we on the bingo?
Oh, well, Sarah got a bingo. The bottom, the whole bottom row.
Oh, he said
is a
Midwest
bingo.
values.
Yeah.
I missed that. Okay.
Oh, I think we're coming back here. So we
Okay.
gotta come back in.
Welcome back to the CBS News vice presidential debate. We want to turn now to America's gun violence epidemic. The leading cause of death for children and teens in America is by firearms. Senator Vance, you oppose most gun legislation that Democrats claim would curb gun violence. You oppose red flag gun laws and legislation to ban certain semi-automatic rifles, including AR-15s. So let me ask you, earlier this year, for the first time, the parents of a school shooter were convicted of involuntary manslaughter and sentenced to 10 years in prison. Do you think holding parents responsible could curb mass shootings? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, Nora, on that particular case, I don't know the full details, but I certainly trust local law enforcement and local authorities to make those decisions. I think in some cases the answer is going to be yes, and in some cases the answer is going to be no. And the details really matter here, of course. For example, if a kid steals a gun, that's going to be different than if a parent hands over a gun knowing that their kid is potentially dangerous. But look, I want to just sort of speak as a father of 3 beautiful little kids, and our oldest is now in 2nd grade. And like a lot of parents, we send our kids to school with such hope and such joy and such pride at their little faces on the first day of school. And we know, unfortunately, that a lot of kids are going to experience this terrible epidemic of gun violence. And of course, our hearts go out to the families that are affected by this terrible stuff. And we do have to do better. And I think that Governor Walz and I actually probably agree that we need to do better on this. The question is just, how do we actually do it? Now, here's something that really bothers me and worries me about this epidemic of violence. The gross majority, close to 90% in some of the statistics I've seen, of the gun violence in this country is committed with illegally obtained firearms. And while we're on that topic, we know that thanks to Kamala Harris's open border, we've seen a massive influx in the number of illegal guns run by the Mexican drug cartel. So that number, the amount of illegal guns in our country is higher today than it was 3.5 years ago. But what do we do about the schools? What do we do to protect our kids? And I think the answer is, and I say this not loving the answer, because I don't want my kids to go to school in a school that feels unsafe or where there are visible signs of security. But I unfortunately think that we have to increase security in our schools. We have to make the doors lock better. We have to make the doors stronger. We've got to make the windows stronger. And of course, we've got to increase school resource officers, because the idea that we can magically wave a wand and take guns out of the hands of bad guys, it just doesn't fit with recent experience. So we've got to make our schools safer. And I think we've got to have some common sense bipartisan solutions for how to do that.
There was an armed guard in the last school shooting.
Well, I think all the parents watching tonight, this is your biggest nightmare. Look, I got a 17-year-old, and he witnessed a shooting at a community center playing volleyball. Those things don't leave you. As a member of Congress, I sat in my office surrounded by dozens of the Sandy Hook parents, and they were looking at my 7-year-old picture on the wall. Their 7-year-old were dead, and they were asking us to do something. And look, I'm a hunter. I own firearms. The vice president is. We understand that the Second Amendment is there, but our first responsibility is to our kids to figure this out. In Minnesota, we've enacted enhanced red flag laws, enhanced background checks, and we can start to get data. But here's the problem. If we really want to solve this, we've got folks that won't allow research to be even done on gun violence. And this idea that we should just live with it, and here's what I do think, that this is a good start to the conversation. I 100% believe that Senator Vance hates it when these kids, it's abhorrent and it breaks your heart. I agree with that. But that's not far enough when we know there are things that worked. I've spent time in Finland and seen some Finnish schools. They don't have this happen, even though they have a high gun ownership rate in the country. There are reasonable things that we can do to make a difference. It's not infringing on your Second Amendment. And the idea to have some of these weapons out there, it just doesn't make any sense. Kamala Harris, as an attorney general, worked on this issue. She knows that it's there. No one's trying to scaremonger and say we're taking your guns, but I ask all of you out there, do you want your schools hardened to look like a fort? Is that what we have to go? When we know There's countries around the world that their children aren't practicing these types of drills. They're being kids. We owe it to them to get a fix. These are things that shouldn't be that difficult. You can still keep your firearms, and we can make a difference. We have to. If you're listening tonight, this breaks your heart.
Senator.
Tim, first of all, I didn't know that your 17-year-old witnessed a shooting, and I'm sorry about that, and I hope that he's doing okay. Christ have mercy. It is awful. Wow. And I appreciate what Tim said, actually, about Finland, because I do think it illustrates some of the frankly, weird differences between our own country's gun violence problem and Finland. Is, okay, first of all, we have way higher rates of mental health abuse, or mental health substance abuse. We have way higher rates of depression, way higher rates of anxiety. We unfortunately have a mental health crisis in this country that I really do think that we need to get to the root causes of, because I don't think it's the whole reason why we have such a bad gun violence problem, but I do think it's a big piece of it. Another driver of the gun violence epidemic, especially that affecting our kids, it doesn't earn as many headlines, but is the terrible gun violence problem in a lot of our big cities. And this is why we have to empower law enforcement to arrest the bad guys, put them away, and take gun offenders off the streets. I think there's a whole host of things that we can do here, but I do think at our schools we've got to talk about more security.
Senator, thank you. Governor, you previously opposed an assault weapons ban, but only later in your political career did you change your position. Why?
Yeah, I sat in that office with those Sandy Hook parents. I've become friends with school shooters. I've seen it. Look, the NRA, I was an NRA guy for a long time. They used to teach gun safety. I'm of an age where my shotgun was in my car so I could pheasant hunt after football practice. That's not where we live today.
Football.
And several things I want to mention on this is talking about cities and where it's at. The number one where the most firearm deaths happen in Minnesota are rural suicides. And we have an epidemic of children getting guns and shooting themselves. And so we have, and we should look at all of the issues. Making sure folks have health care and all that, but I want to be very careful. This idea of stigmatizing mental health, just because you have a mental health issue doesn't mean you're violent. And I think what we end up doing is we start looking for a scapegoat. Sometimes it just is the guns. It's just the guns, and there are things that you can do about it. But I do think that this is one, and I think this is a healthy conversation. I think there's a capacity to find solutions on this that work, protect Second Amendment, protect our children. That's our priority.
Gentlemen, thank you. Margaret.
Wow, that was
That's
good.
a
Thank you,
great
Nora.
answer.
Let's turn now to
Maybe
the
his
top
strongest of the
contributor
night.
to
It's really
inflation,
good.
the high cost of housing and rent. There's a shortage of more than 4 million homes in the United States, and that contributes to the high housing prices. Governor Walz, the Harris campaign promises a $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers and a $10,000 tax credit. They also promise to build 3 million new homes. Where are you building these homes, and won't handing out that kind of money just drive up prices higher?
No, it's not handing out. We have, first, let me say this issue of housing, and I think those of you listening on this, the problem we've had is that we've got a lot of folks that see housing as another commodity. It can be bought up, it can be shifted, it can be moved around. Those are not folks living in those houses. Those of you listening tonight, that house is a big deal. I bought and owned one house in my life. My mom still lives in the house where I was. And when I think of a house, I'm thinking of Christmas services after midnight mass where you go with your family. We need to make it more affordable. And one of the things, as I said, this program that the Vice President is pushing forward and bringing a new way of approaching this is something we're doing in Minnesota from that lead. We in the state invested in making sure our housing was the biggest investment that we'd ever made in housing. It starts to make it easier. We cut some of the red tape. Local folks, look, we can't do it at the federal level, but local folks make it easier to build those homes. And then that down payment assistance. I can tell all of you out there, one of the, certainly for me, using the GI Bill was one thing, but a veteran's home loan, the big thing about a veteran's home loan is you don't have to pay the down payment.
Yeah.
Those are things that make it there. Now, look, you're going to pay it back, and you're going to pay your mortgage. Those are things that we know in the long run, the appreciated value, the generational wealth that's created from it. And I will give Minneapolis an example. Minneapolis is the one city where we've seen the lowest inflation rates. We've seen a 12% increase in stock because we've put some of these things in, and we're implementing a state program to make sure we give some of that down payment assistance. We get it back from people because here's what we know. People with stable housing end up with stable jobs. People with stable housing have their kids able to get to school. All of those things in the long run end up saving our money. And that's the thing that I think we should be able to find some common ground in, but we can't blame immigrants for the only reason. That's not the case that's happening in many cities. The fact of the matter is that we don't have enough naturally affordable housing, but we can make sure that the government's there to help kickstart it, create that base.
Governor, your time is up. Senator Vance, as far as your campaign's position, the promise is to seize federal lands to build homes, remove regulation, provide tax breaks, and cut back on immigration, which you say pushes up prices. Where are you going to build all the new homes you're promising, and what part of any of this plan will provide immediate relief? You have 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, Tim just said something that I agree with. We don't want to blame immigrants for higher housing prices, but we do want to blame Kamala Harris for letting in millions of illegal aliens into this country, which does drive up costs, Tim. 25 million illegal aliens competing with Americans for scarce homes is one of the most significant drivers of home prices in the country. It's why we have massive increases in home prices that have happened right alongside massive increases in illegal alien populations under Kamala Harris's leadership. Now, Tim just mentioned a bunch of ideas. Now, some of those ideas I actually think are halfway decent, and some of them I disagree with. But the most important thing here is Kamala Harris is not running as a newcomer to politics. She is the sitting vice president. If she wants to enact all of these policies to make housing more affordable, I invite her to use the office that the American people already gave her, not sit around and campaign and do nothing while Americans find the American dream of homeownership completely unaffordable. Now, you asked, Margaret, what would immediately change the equation for American citizens? If you lower energy prices, as Donald Trump says, drill, baby, drill, one of the biggest drivers of housing costs aside from illegal immigration is, think about it, if a truck driver's paying 40% more for diesel, then the lumber he's delivering to the job site to build the house is also going to become a lot more expensive. If we open up American energy, you will get immediate pricing relief for American citizens, not, by the way, just in housing, but in a whole host of other economic goods, too.
Senator Vance, you still have 23 seconds there. Do you want to answer?
Can I have it?
Governor, we will get to you in a moment. But, Senator, where are you going to seize the federal lands? Can you clarify?
Well, what Donald Trump has said is we have a lot of federal lands that aren't being used for anything. They're not being used for national park. They're not being used, and they could be places where we build a lot of housing. And I do think that we should be opening up building in this country. We have a lot of land that could be used. We have a lot of Americans that need homes. We should be kicking out illegal immigrants who are competing for those homes, and we should be building more homes for the American citizens who deserve to be here.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, I do want to let you respond to the allegation that the vice president is letting in.
Well, of course, that's not true. And again, you have the facts. I guess we agreed not to fact check. I'll check it. That, look, crossings are down compared to when Donald Trump left office. But it's, again, blaming and not trying to find the solution. I was going to ask, though, on this question, are we going to drill and build houses in the same federal land? And I think when people hear federal lands, these are really important pieces of land. Now, Minnesota doesn't have a lot of federal lands. I know in the western part of the countries we do. There's not a lot of federal lands in and around Minneapolis, for example. So the issue is I don't understand the federal lands issue unless we see this, and I worry about this as someone who cares deeply about our national parks and our federal lands. Look, Minnesota, we protect these things. We've got about 20% of the world's fresh water. These lands protect. They're there for a reason. They belong to all of us. But again, this is when you view housing and you view these things as commodities. Like, there's a chance to make money here. Let's take this federal land and let's sell it to people for that. I think there's better ways to do this. We've seen it in Minnesota. We're able to refurbish some of these houses. We're able to make some investments. That gets people in. And I'm still on the fact on this. Economists, Senator Vance, you said you don't like the economists. Which economists are saying that it is immigrants that's adding to the cost?
Governor, your time is up. But Senator, on that point, I'd like for you to clarify. There are many contributing factors to high housing costs. What evidence do you have that migrants are part of this problem?
Yes, JD.
Well, there's a Federal Reserve study that we're happy to share after the debate. We'll put it up on social media, actually, that really drills down on the connection between increased levels of migration, especially illegal immigration, and higher housing prices. Now, of course, Margaret, that's not the entire driver of higher housing prices. It's also the regulatory regime of Kamala Harris. Look, we are a country of builders. We're a country of doers. We're a country of explorers. But we increasingly have a federal administration that makes it harder to develop our our resources, makes it harder to build things, and wants to throw people in jail for not doing everything exactly as Kamala Harris says they have to do. And what that means is that you have a lot of people who would love to build homes who aren't able to build homes. I actually agree with Tim Walz. We should get out of this idea of housing as a commodity. But the thing that has most turned housing into a commodity is giving it away to millions upon millions of people who have no legal right to be here.
What are the federal regulations? I deal with this as a governor.
You can very quickly reply.
I'm sorry. I get this as a governor, and I don't necessarily disagree with that in some cases, many of those are local, many of them are state. I don't know which ones are federal, but I think whenever we talk regulations, people think they can get rid of them. I think you want to be able to get out of your house in a fire. I think you want to make sure that it's fireproof and those types of things. So which are the regulations? Because the vice president's not responsible for those. Right. Congress writes those.
It's local.
Governor, thank you. Gentlemen, we have a lot to get to. You're passionate about the housing crisis, I can tell.
Good response.
But Nora?
Thank you.
Great response.
One of the top problems facing Americans is the high cost of health care. Senator Vance, at the last presidential debate, former President Trump was asked about replacing the Affordable Care Act. In response, he said, "I have concepts of a plan." Since then, Senator, you've talked about changing how chronically ill Americans get health insurance. Can you explain how that would work? And can you guarantee that Americans with pre-existing conditions won't pay more? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, of course, we're going to cover Americans with pre-existing conditions. In fact, a lot of my family members have gotten health care. I believe, members of my family actually got private health insurance, at least for the first time, switched off of Medicaid onto private insurance for the first time under Donald Trump's leadership. And I think that, a lot of people have criticized this concepts of a plan remark. Look, it's very simple common sense. I think as Tim Walz knows from 12 years in Congress, you're not going to propose a 900-page bill standing on a debate stage. It would bore everybody to tears, and it wouldn't actually mean anything because part of this is the give and take of bipartisan negotiation. Now, when Donald Trump was actually president, and again, he has a record to be proud of, prescription drugs fell in 2018 for the first time in a very long time. Under Kamala Harris's leadership, prescription drugs are up about 7%. Under Donald Trump's entire 4 years, they were up about 1.5%. He introduced pricing transparency. Think about healthcare. You go into a hospital, you try to buy something, and nobody knows what it actually costs. That price transparency will actually give American consumers a little bit more choice and will also drive down costs. And we talked about, the reinsurance regulations is what I was talking about. Look, Donald Trump has said that if we allow states to experiment a little bit on how to cover both the chronically ill but the non-chronically ill, it's not just a plan. He actually implemented some of these regulations when he was president of the United States. And I think you can make a really good argument that it salvaged Obamacare, which was doing disastrously until Donald Trump came along. And I think this is an important point about President Trump. Of course, you don't have to agree with everything that President Trump has ever said or ever done. But when Obamacare was crushing under the weight of its own regulatory burden and health care costs, Donald Trump could have destroyed the program. Instead, he worked in a bipartisan way to ensure that Americans had access to affordable care. It's not perfect, of course, and there's so much more that we can do, but I think that Donald Trump has earned the right to put in place some better health care policies. He's earned it because he did it successfully the first time.
Governor?
All right, here's where being an old guy gives you some history. I was there at the creation of the ACA. And the reason it was so important is I come from a major healthcare state, home of the Mayo Clinic, home to Medical Alley, 3M, Medtronic, all of those. We understand healthcare. It's why we're ranked first on affordability and accessibility and quality of healthcare. And so what I know is under Kamala Harris, more people are covered than they have before. And those of you listening, this is critical to you. Now, Donald Trump all of a sudden wants to. Go back and remember this. He ran on the first thing he was going to do on day one was to repeal Obamacare. On day one, he tried to sign an executive order to repeal the ACA. He signed on to a lawsuit to repeal the ACA, but lost at the Supreme Court. And he would have repealed the ACA had it not been for the courage of John McCain to save that bill. Now, fast forward, what that means to you is you lose your pre-existing conditions. Yep. If you're sitting at home and you got asthma, too bad. If you're a woman, probably not. Broke your foot during football, might kick you out. Your kids get kicked out when they're 26. Kamala Harris negotiated drug prices for the first time with Medicare. We have 10 drugs that will come online, the most common ones that'll be there. But look, this issue, and when Donald Trump said, I've got a concept of a plan, it cracked me up as a fourth grade teacher because my kids would have never given me that. But what Senator Vance just explained might be worse than a concept, because what he explained is pre-Obamacare. And I'll make this as simple as possible because I have done this for a long time. What they're saying is, if you're healthy, why should you be paying more? So what they're going to do is let insurance companies pick who they insure, because guess what happens? You pay your premium, it's not much. They figure they're not going to have to pay out to you. But those of you a little older, gray, got cancer, you're going to get kicked out of it. That's why the system didn't work. Kamala Harris will protect and enhance the ACA.
Governor, thank you. Senator, you have not yet explained how you would protect people with pre-existing conditions or laid out that plan.
Well, look, we currently have laws and regulations in place right now that protect people with pre-existing conditions.
Because
we
of
want to
Obamacare.
keep those regulations in place, but we also want to make the health insurance marketplace function a little bit better. Now, what Governor Walz just said is actually not true. A lot of what happened, and the reason that Obamacare was crushing under its own weight, is that a lot of young and healthy people were leaving the exchanges. Donald Trump actually helped address that problem, and he did so in a way that preserved people's access to coverage who had pre-existing conditions. But again, something that these guys do is they make a lot of claims about if Donald Trump becomes president, all of these terrible consequences are going to ensue. But in reality, Donald Trump was president. Inflation was low. Take-home pay was higher. And he saved the very program from a Democratic administration that was collapsing and would have collapsed absent his leadership. He did his job, which is govern in a bipartisan way and get results, not just complain about problems, but actually solve them.
Governor, did enrollment under the Affordable Care Act go up under the Trump administration?
It's higher now that we've seen it go up. Look, people are using it. The system works. And the question about this of young people or whatever, that's the individual mandate piece of this. And Republicans fought tooth and nail saying, well, Americans should be free to do this. Well, then what happens is... So you think the
individual mandate's a good idea?
You shrink. I think the idea of making sure the risk pool is broad enough to cover everyone, that's the only way insurance works. When it doesn't, it collapses. You are asking pre-ACA where we get people out. Look, people know that they need to be on health care. People expect it to be there. And when we are able to make it, and we are making it this way, when we incentivize people to be in the market, when we help people who might not be able to afford it get there, and we make sure then when you get sick and old, it's there for you. Because I heard people say, well, I don't want to buy into Medicare or whatever. Good luck buying health care once you get past 70. So look, the ACA works. We can continue to do better. Kamala Harris did that. The way she made everything better was negotiating those 10 drugs on Medicare for the first time in American history.
Thank you. Margaret?
Can I address that?
I apologize. We're out of time. We have a number of subjects to discuss. Margaret?
Let's talk about families in America.
Good banter, though.
There is a child care crisis in this country, and the United States is one of the very few developed countries in the world without a national paid leave program for new parents.
Or guaranteed affordable health care.
You've said that if Democrats win both the White House and Congress, this is a day one priority for you. How long should employers be required to pay workers while they are home taking care of their newborns? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, that's negotiable, and that's what Congress worked. But here's what the deal is. Americans sitting out there right now, you may work for a big company. Look, we're home in Minnesota to some of the largest Fortune 500 companies. Kamala Harris knows that in California. Those companies provide paid family and medical leave. One is, I think they're moral and they think it's a good thing, but it also keeps their employees healthy. We in Minnesota passed a paid family and medical leave. You have a child, and I had to go back to work 5 days after my kids were born. This allows you to stay home a certain amount of time. What we know is that gets the child off to a better start. The family works better.
It's pro-family.
They stay in their employers. We get more consistency in that. So Kamala Harris has made it a priority. We implemented it in Minnesota, and we see growth. That's how you become a pro-business state. But the negotiations on it, and here's the issue. Those big companies are able to offer it. Those of you out there who don't have it, just imagine what happens if you get cancer or your child gets sick. We know what happens. You end up staying home. In some cases, that means no paycheck because you've got no protection on that. This is the case of an economy that Donald Trump has set for the wealthiest amongst us. He is willing to give those tax breaks to the wealthiest. He's willing to say, bust those unions up, do whatever. What we're saying is the economy works best when it works for all of us. And so a paid family medical leave program, and I will tell you, go to the families or go to the businesses and ask them. As far as childcare on this, you have to take it at both the supply and the demand side. You can't expect the most important people in our lives to take either our children or our parents to get paid the least amount of money. And we have to make it easier for folks to be able to get into that business and then to make sure that folks are able to pay for that. We were able to do it in Minnesota, and I'm still telling you this. We were listed as the best state. We're still in crisis on this. A federal program of paid family and medical leave and help with this will enhance our workforce, enhance our families, and make it easier to have the children that you want.
Right.
Governor, your time is up. Senator,
family.
do you support a national paid leave program? And if so, for how long should employers be mandated to pay their employees while they are home taking care of their newborn? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, first of all, Margaret, a number of my Republican colleagues and some Democrats, too, have worked on this issue. And I think there is a bipartisan solution here because a lot of us care about this issue. I mean, look, I speak from this very personally because I'm married to a beautiful woman who is an incredible mother to our 3 beautiful kids, but is also a very, very brilliant corporate litigator. And I'm so proud of her. But being a working mom, even for somebody with all of the advantages of my wife, is extraordinarily difficult. And it's not just difficult from a policy perspective. She actually had access to paid family leave because she worked for a bigger company. But the cultural pressure on young families and especially young women, I think makes it really hard for people to choose the family model they want. A lot of young women would like to go back to work immediately. Some would like to spend a little time home with the kids. Some would like to spend longer at home with the kids. We should have a family care model that makes choice possible. And I think this is a very important substantive difference between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris's approach. I mean, look, if you look at the federal programs that we have that support paid family leave right now, the Community Development Block Grant, and there's another block grant program that spends a lot of money from the federal government. These programs only go to one kind of child care model. Let's say you'd like your church maybe to help you out with child care. Maybe you live in a rural area or an urban area and you'd like to get together with families in your neighborhood to provide child care in the way that makes the most sense. You don't get access to any of these federal monies. We want to promote choice in how we deliver family care and how we promote child care because, look, it is unacceptable. And, you know, of course, Tim and I have been on the campaign trail a lot the past 7 or 8 weeks. And one of the biggest complaints I hear from young families is people who feel like they don't have options, like they're choosing between going to work or taking care for their kids. That is an incredible burden to put on American families. We're the only country that does it. I think we could do a heck of a lot better.
Senator, thank you. You have also said, Senator Vance,
he didn't really
many
answer
things
the question
about the American family. The Federal Reserve says parents will spend nearly as much on child care as they do on housing each month. So I want to get your thoughts on this. President Trump recently said, as much as child care is talked about as being expensive, it's relatively speaking not very expensive compared to the kinds of numbers we'll be taking in. Is President Trump committed to the $5,000 per child tax credit that you have described? You have 1 minute.
Well, what President Trump said, Margaret, I just want to defend my running mate here a little bit, is that we're going to be taking in a lot of money by penalizing companies for shipping jobs overseas and penalizing countries who employ slave laborers and then ship their products back into our country and undercut the wages of American workers. It's the heart of the Donald Trump economic plan. Cut taxes for American workers and American families. Cut taxes for businesses that are hiring and building companies in the United States of America, but penalize companies and countries that are shipping jobs overseas. That's the heart of the economic proposal. And I think what President Trump is saying is that when we bring in this additional revenue with higher economic growth, we're going to be able to provide paid family leave, child care options that are viable and workable for a lot of American families.
Can you clarify how that will solve the child care shortage?
Well, because as Tim said, a lot of the child care shortage is we just don't have enough resources going into the multiple people who could be providing family care options. And we're going to have to, unfortunately, look, we're going to have to spend more money. We're going to have to induce more people to want to provide child care options for American families, because the reason it's so expensive right now is because you've got way too few people providing this very essential service.
Thank you, Senator. Governor Walz, your ticket also has some child care tax credit proposals. Do you think Congress will agree to the $6,000 credit for newborns and $3,000 credit for children over the age of 6, as your campaign has promised?
Sounds pro-family.
Well, if these members of Congress are listening to anybody, I can tell you, and this is the biggest issue. Everybody listening tonight knows. I mean, I'm sure they were shocked to hear it's not that expensive. And let's be clear, whether it's $5,000 or $6,000, that pays you about 3 or 4 months. Let's be clear of where we're at on this. It's because we got out of an imbalance on this. We thought we were going to get by not paying people. I don't think Senator Vance and I are that far apart. I'm not opposed to what he's talking about on options. We've done scholarship types of things. I think we need to be open to making the case. But the issue here is, the question you asked is, you're not going to pay for it with these tariffs. That's just adding another $4,000 on the family and taking less. So not only do they not get the money to pay for that, they're $4,000 in the hole. That's Wharton School. That's his alma mater. And so I think the issue here is, those members of Congress, I can't believe they're not. When I go to businesses, sure, they'll talk about taxes sometime, but they will lead with childcare and they will lead with housing, because we know the problem is, especially in a state like Minnesota, we need more workers because our economy's growing, but we need the workforce.
Governor, thank you. We need to move on. Nora?
Let's talk about the state of democracy.
This is a marathon of a debate.
Issue for Americans after the economy and inflation.
Big one.
After the 2020 election, President Trump's campaign and others filed 62 lawsuits contesting the results. And Judges, including those appointed by President Trump and other Republican presidents, looked at the evidence and said there was no widespread fraud. The governors of every state in the nation, Republicans and Democrats, certified the 2020 election results and sent a legal slate of electors to Congress for January 6th. Yep. Senator Vance, you have said you would not have certified the last presidential election and would have asked the states to submit alternative electors.
Here comes the crazy.
That has been called unconstitutional and illegal. Would you again seek to challenge this year's election results, even if every governor certifies the results? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, Nora, first of all, I think that we're focused on the future. We need to figure out how to solve the inflation crisis caused by Kamala Harris's policies, make housing affordable, make groceries affordable, and that's what we're focused on. But I want to answer your question because you did ask it. Look, what President Trump has said is that there were problems in 2020, and my own belief is that we should fight about those issues, debate those issues peacefully in the public square, and that's all I've said, and that's all that Donald Trump has said. Remember, he said that on January the 6th, the protesters ought to protest peacefully. And on January the 20th, what happened? Joe Biden became the president. Donald Trump left the White House. And now, of course, unfortunately, we have all of the negative policies that have come from the Harris-Biden administration. I believe that we actually do have a threat to democracy in this country, but unfortunately, it's not the threat to democracy that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz want to talk about. It is the threat of censorship. It's Americans casting aside lifelong friendships because of disagreements over politics. It's big technology companies silencing their fellow citizens. And it's Kamala Harris saying that rather than debate and persuade her fellow Americans, she'd like to censor people who engage in misinformation. I think that is a much bigger threat to democracy than anything that we've seen in this country in the last 4 years, in the last 40 years. Now, I'm really proud, especially given that I was raised by 2 lifelong blue-collar Democrats, to have the endorsement of Bobby Kennedy Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard, lifelong leaders in the Democratic coalition. And of course, they don't agree with me and Donald Trump on every issue. We don't have to agree on every issue, but we're united behind a basic American First Amendment principle that we ought to debate our differences. We ought to argue about them. We ought to try to persuade our fellow Americans. Kamala Harris is engaged in censorship at an industrial scale. She did it during COVID. She's done it over a number of other issues. And that, to me, is a much bigger threat to democracy than what Donald Trump said when he said that protesters should peacefully protest on January the 6th.
Okay, we're back. We're back to normal politics. We're back to the normal style
tonight's debate, and I think there was a lot of commonality here. And I'm sympathetic to misspeaking on things, and I think I might have with the senator.
Me too, man.
There's one though that this one is troubling to me, and I say that because I think we need to tell the story.
It's like we were doing well, JD.
To acknowledge this. And the fact is that I don't think we can be the frog in the pot and let the boiling water go up. He was very clear. I mean, he lost this election, and he said he didn't. 140 police officers were beaten at the Capitol that day, some with the American flag. Several later died. And it wasn't just in there. In Minnesota, a group gathered on the state Capitol grounds in St. Paul, and said, we're marching to the governor's residence and there may be casualties. The only person there was my son and his dog, who was rushed out crying by state police.
Yep.
That issue, and Mike Pence standing there as they were chanting, hang Mike Pence. Mike Pence made the right decision. So, Senator, it was adjudicated over and over and over. I worked with kids long enough to know, and I said as a football coach, sometimes you really want to win, but the democracy is bigger than winning an election. You shake hands, and then you try and do everything you can to help the other side win. That's what was at stake here. Now, the thing I'm most concerned about is the idea that imprisoning your political opponents, already laying the groundwork for people not accepting this. And a president's words matter.
Shocking.
A president's words matter. People hear that. So I think this issue of settling our differences at the ballot box, shaking hands when we lose, being honest about it, but to deny what happened on January 6th, the first time in American history
Yes. It's huge.
that a president or anyone tried to overturn a fair election and the peaceful transfer of power. And here we are 4 years later in the same boat. I will tell you this, that when this is over, we need to shake hands this election, and the winner needs to be the winner. This has got to stop. It's tearing our country apart.
He's so right.
Margaret? Senator Vance, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, well, look, Tim,
Did you?
first of all, it's really rich for Democratic leaders to say that Donald Trump is a unique threat to democracy when he peacefully gave over power on January the 20th, as we have done for 250 years in this country.
What?
We are going to shake hands after this debate and after this election. And of course, I hope that we win, and I think we're going to win. But if Tim Walz is the next vice president, he'll have my prayers, he'll have my best wishes, and he'll have my help whenever he wants it. But we have to remember that for years in this country, Democrats protested the results of elections. Hillary Clinton in 2016 said that Donald Trump had the election stolen by Vladimir Putin because the Russians bought like $500,000 worth of Facebook ads. This has been going on for a long time. And if we want to say that we need to respect the results of the election, I'm on board. But if we want to say, as Tim Walz is saying, that this is just a problem that Republicans have had, I don't buy that.
I do.
Governor.
January 6th was not Facebook ads. And I think a revisionist history on this. Look, I don't understand how we got to this point. But the issue was that happened. Donald Trump can do it. And all of us say there's no place for this. It has massive repercussions. This idea that there's censorship to stop people from threatening to kill someone, threatening to do something, that's not censorship. Censorship is book banning. We've seen that. We've seen that brought up.
Who's doing that, JD?
For everyone tonight, and I'm going to thank Senator Vance. I think this is the conversation they want to hear. And I think there's a lot of agreement. But this is one that we are miles apart on.
Yeah.
This was a threat to our democracy in a way that we had not seen. And it manifested itself because of Donald Trump's inability to say. He is still saying he didn't lose the election. I would just ask that. Did he lose the 2020 election?
Did he?
Tim, I'm focused on the future. Did Kamala Harris censor Americans from speaking their mind in the wake of the 2020 COVID situation?
That is a damning non-answer.
Has she? It's a damning non-answer for you to not talk about censorship. Obviously, Donald Trump and I think that there were problems in 2020. We've talked about it. I'm happy to talk about it further. But you guys attack us for not believing in democracy. The most sacred right under the United States democracy is the First Amendment. You yourself have said there's no First Amendment right to misinformation. Kamala Harris wants to use the power of government and big tech to silence people from speaking their minds. That is a threat to democracy that will long outlive this present political moment. I would like Democrats and Republicans to both reject censorship. Let's persuade one another. Let's argue about ideas, and then let's come together afterwards.
You can't yell fire in a crowded theater. That's the test. That's the Supreme Court test.
Tim, fire in a crowded theater. You guys wanted to kick people off of Facebook for saying that toddlers shouldn't wear masks.
Senator, the governor does have the floor.
Fire in a crowded
Toddlers shouldn't wear masks?
That is criticizing the policies of the government, which is the right of every American.
Senator, the governor does have the floor for 1 minute to respond to you.
Yeah. Well, I don't run Facebook. What I do know is I see a candidate out there who refused, and now again, and this I'm pretty shocked by this. He lost the election. This is not a debate. It's not. It's not anything anywhere other than in Donald Trump's world. Because look, when Mike Pence made that decision to certify that election, that's why Mike Pence isn't on this stage. What I'm concerned about is Where is the firewall with Donald Trump? Where is the firewall if he knows he could do anything, including taking an election, and his vice president's not going to stand to it? That's what we're asking you, America. Will you stand up? Will you keep your oath of office, even if the president doesn't? And I think Kamala Harris would agree. She wouldn't have picked me if she didn't think I would do that, because of course that's what we would do. So America, I think you've got a really clear choice on this election of who's going to honor that democracy and who's going to honor Donald Trump.
Governor, your time is
Great
up.
answer.
Thank you, gentlemen. We will be right back with both of our candidates. The CBS News.
Wow.
Is this a 2-hour debate?
Yeah, it's 2 hours, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. Friends, how are we doing? Let me just check in with the audience real quick. Friends, how are you doing? Are you hanging in? This is a marathon. I want to just say personally, I know April feels the same way. I'm honored that 1,400 plus people have hung out with both of us for the past 2 hours to watch this debate. I do not want to watch these things alone. I love being with you and being able to do this. It just means the world. I'm reading all the comments. I'm putting comments on the screen. I just love doing this stuff together. It means the world. So again, thank you. If you want to support the work that we do, we are a non-profit organization. Super chats go right to the organization, and you can also donate. So we are a 501c3, which means if you scan this QR code and donate through this link, any donation is tax deductible. I don't know how else to say it. I am honored. I am humbled. I know April feels the same exact way. Being able to do this on Fridays with her and being able to do these live streams and have literally 1,000+ people tune in, it's just amazing. And donations is the way that we're able to do this work. We don't do anything behind paywalls. There's no Patreon. There's no subscriptions. There's no higher tiers that get special access to me or April or our content. We're able to do all of this work completely paywall free and accessible to everyone because of the generosity of people like you. So like I said, any super chat or any donation via this QR code is tax deductible because we are a 501c3 nonprofit. I cannot thank you enough. It's how we're able to make this content happen all the time. So April, let's go back while we have a minute or two. I gotta say, really unbelievable debate. I'm with Waltz here, where he's like, JD, you and we had so much common ground, and then all of a sudden, like this, you can't say that Donald, and you know why he can't say that Donald Trump lost the election? Because Donald Trump would disown him.
Yep. I don't know if you've noticed, he keeps looking, like when Tim's talking, he'll like look up, like he's looking at a specific thing. I don't know what he's looking at. In my head, I feel like he's like, am I doing okay, Trump? I don't know. But that you're exactly right. He cannot say that Trump lost the election because Donald Trump would lose his mind.
Exactly.
Over that.
He would lose his mind 100%.
And I do think that, like, okay, I think this is the most human and most likable that I've seen JD Vance
I agree. I totally
this whole election cycle. But that at the very end was that reminder, JD Vance is not who he used to be. He is now a Trump puppet.
100%.
As everybody in the Trump administration is right now, is a Trump puppet. They answer to one person and one person only. They are now yes men that are there to keep Trump happy, no matter what Trump wants or does. That is the scary thing about this, because I honestly, if JD Vance was the presidential person right now, if he was the Republican nominee for president, I would not vote for him. I still think he's a terrible person. I don't like his values, but I would not be terrified for the state of our country, because I don't think he's not a loony narcissist who is unpredictable. 100%. Do you remember when Donald Trump almost got us in a war with North Korea over a tweet?
Yeah.
Like him and Kim Jong-un got in a tweet war.
Yep. 100%.
I don't think we remember how chaotic Trump's presidency is. He Sharpied a hurricane map because he didn't want to be wrong.
Right.
And those are things like we've just forgotten. And it's going to be worse the second round than it was the first time, because now he's going to be setting himself up with people who will only say yes to him, especially with Project 2025 and how he's going to reclassify federal workers.
100%. 100,000%. Don't forget, Trump was so bad that Twitter had to ban him for how much he lied.
Yeah.
Think about that for a second, you know? So, okay, we're back.
He
Here we
totally
go.
incited the insurrection.
Presidential debate. It is now time for the closing statement. Senator Vance won the virtual coin toss and elected to go last. So, Governor Walz, you are first. You have 2 minutes.
Well, thank you, Senator Vance. Thank you to CBS News. And most importantly, thank you to all of you. If you're still up and the folks who miss Dancing with Our Stars, I appreciate it. But look, the support of the democracy matters. It matters that you're here. And I'm as surprised as anybody of this coalition that Kamala Harris has built, from Bernie Sanders to Dick Cheney to Taylor Swift, and a whole bunch of folks in between there. And they don't all agree on everything, but they are truly optimistic people. They believe in a positive future of this country and one where our politics can be better than it is. And I have to tell you, that better than it is the sense of optimism that there can be an opportunity economy that works for everyone, not just to get by, but to get ahead. And the idea that freedom really means something, not the freedom of government to be in your bedroom or exam room, but the freedom for you to make choices about yourself. Now, look, we all know who Donald Trump is. He's told us, and as Maya Angelou said, believe him when he told you that. His first inaugural address talked about American carnage, and then he spent 4 years trying to maybe do that. Senator Vance tonight made it clear he will stand with Donald Trump's agenda. He will continue to push down that road. Excuse me. Kamala Harris gives us a different option. Now, I'll have to tell you, I'm going to be careful about the quotes, but there's one that Senator Vance said that does resonate with me. He said, Donald Trump makes the people I care about afraid. A lot of America feels that way.
Yep.
We don't need to be afraid. Franklin Roosevelt was right. All we have to fear is fear itself. Kamala Harris is bringing us a new way forward. She's bringing us a politics of joy. She's bringing real solutions for the middle class, and she's centering you at the heart of that. All the while asking everyone, join this movement, make your voices heard. Let's look for a new day where everybody gets that opportunity and everybody gets a chance to thrive. I humbly ask for your vote on November 5th for Kamala Harris.
Governor Walz, thank you. Senator Vance, your closing statement.
Well, I want to thank Governor Walz, you folks at CBS, and of course the American people for tuning in this evening. And one of the issues we didn't talk about was energy. And I remember when I was being raised by my grandmother, when she didn't have enough money to turn on the heat some nights because Ohio gets pretty cold at night and because money was often very tight. And I believe, as a person who wants to be your next vice president, that we are a rich and prosperous enough country where every American, whether they're rich or poor, ought to be able to turn on their heat in the middle of a cold winter night. That's gotten more difficult thanks to Kamala Harris's energy policies. I believe that whether you're rich or poor, you ought to be able to afford a nice meal for your family. That's gotten harder because of Kamala Harris's policies. I believe that whether you're rich or poor, you ought to be able to afford to buy a house. You ought to be able to live in safe neighborhoods. You ought to not have your communities flooded with fentanyl. And that, too, has gotten harder with because of Kamala Harris's policies. Now, I've been in politics long enough to do what Kamala Harris does when she stands before the American people and says that on day one, she's going to work on all these challenges I just listed. She's been the vice president for 3.5 years. Day one was 1,400 days ago, and her policies have made these problems worse. Now, I believe that we have the most beautiful country in the world. I meet people on the campaign trail who can't afford food, but have the grace and generosity to ask me how I'm doing and to tell me they're praying for my family. What that has taught me is that we have the greatest country, the most beautiful country, the most incredible people anywhere in the world. But they're not going to be able to achieve their full dreams with the broken leadership that we have in Washington. They're not going to be able to live their American dream if we do the same thing that we've been doing for the last 3.5 years. We need change. We need a new direction. We need a president who has already done this once before and did it well. Please vote for Donald Trump. And whether you vote for me or vote for Tim Walz, I just want to say I'm so proud to be doing this, and I'm rooting for you. God bless you, and good night.
Senator Vance, thank you. And thank you both for participating in the only vice presidential debate of this election cycle. I'm Margaret Brennan.
All right, guys. Hey, everyone, give yourselves a round of applause. I mean, it's 10:47. We made it. We absolutely made it. You did it. The panel should be hopping on in a second. Like I said, friends, if you don't know constitutional lawyer Andrew Seidel, human rights lawyer Qasim Rashid, historian and author Jamar Tisby, you're in for a real treat. This is not going to be super long. I'm thinking 25, 30 minutes. I want to get their thoughts on this debate, what they thought about it, helping you maybe see some things that maybe April and I missed. So hang tight for that. April, I got to say, oh, and by the way, many people were asking for this slide. So I'll keep this back up. If you want to support the work that we're doing, we are a 501c3 nonprofit. All donations made are tax deductible. You can go to either this QR code or you can go to thenewevangelicals.com/donate. And again, friends, thank you so much. It means the world. Yeah, I'm really excited to get our panel on here, hopefully in a minute or two, to get their thoughts. Because honestly, overall, a pretty amicable debate. And then it kind of went off the rails when we got into the insurrection in January 6th stuff. But I was surprised. What do you think, April? Why can't I hear you? I can't hear you at all.
I'm back. Sorry, I muted my mic earlier
and
I forgot. I think overall it was a very refreshing debate. It was cordial. It makes me miss the politics before Trump.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, JD Vance they are the same. He and Donald Trump. Like the Republican Party is really doesn't exist anymore. It is now the party of Trump, and anyone who has opposed Trump is out. Adam Kinzinger, Liz Cheney, they're not there. So, but it does make me miss the way politics used to be, I guess.
100%.
Can I ask you a fun little question?
Yes, you can.
I have pulled up Trump's Truth Social account.
Oh, okay.
Out of that whole debate, what do you think he's talking about the most?
Ooh, that's a great question. Let me think for a second.
I don't think you're gonna guess.
No,
It's about something Tim Walz said.
Oh, then no, I have no idea. Is it about how Tim Walz was bragging about the low cost of healthcare in his state?
No, it was about something Tim Walz said when he was talking about guns.
Oh, okay, tell me. I'm so curious.
I'm going to show the audience.
Are you kidding me?
So I don't know if you caught it. I caught it when he was talking, but Tim Walz, he did say, I've become friends with school shooters as part of his long diatribe. Clearly he meant school shooting victims.
Right.
But literally, they are running with the fact that he also posted this. Trump Vance. It's a sign at the bottom. It says, not friends with school shooters.
Oh, my goodness. Okay. Well, I can't say I'm shocked, but you know what? We do have 2 out of the 3 of our panel. So why don't we get them in and start the conversation? Now, hopefully this works right. Friends, this is live. I'm not a pro. Oh, wait. They're all here. Oh, my God. If this works, I'm going to lose my mind. There are 1,200 people watching live. Let's hope I don't mess this up. Here's button 1. Now, I know it's a lot of me. Hi, Andrew. I see you. But let me...
Hello.
I can bring them all in. Hold on. Let me bring in Jamar. There he is. Okay. I'm almost there. I'm going to bring in... Hold on. Qasim Rashid. Okay. Hold on. I have one more. Where is it? Oh, my gosh. I did it. We have a full... ass panel. Oh, it worked. Hello. Hi, everyone. Thank you. Okay, friends, joining me is Qasim Rashid, human rights lawyer, Dr. Jamar Tisby, author and historian, and Andrew Seidel, author and constitutional lawyer. It is so good. Man, my worlds are all colliding. I love this. It's so good to see all of you. I know it's late. Thank you for making time. I want to start off. Maybe we'll just kind of go from my left to right. Let's start with you, Qasim. Give me your thoughts overall on the debate. What did you think? Who do you think won? And any takeaways that maybe you have for us to hear about?
I've only got 8 pages of notes, sorry. So I've got a lot. No, look, I thought it was a much more civil debate than I thought it would be. I think Walz has a very calming effect on these conversations. You could see Vance kind of unclench his fists a little bit and then compliment Walz in a non-snarky way. I think Walz did a really effective job of showing how he genuinely cares about bipartisanship. He praised Nebraska Senator Langford. He talked about the importance of working across the aisle. And I love the fact, and I'll close my comments with this because I don't want to cannibalize, but I love the fact that Walz went out of his way at every opportunity to counter the demonization of immigrants, of people with mental health issues, of people with depression. I mean, that I thought was an outstanding demonstration of just the kind of person that he is. And it makes me feel good about lobbying so hard to get him into that position. So overall, I think Walz did excellent. I don't see any fatal mistakes he made. I know there's a weird thing about the school shooting thing. I don't think that's going to carry any weight in the long term anyway, but I thought it was very well done. And I think we saw the holes in Vance's arguments. And if I'm a centrist especially, I'm feeling pretty good about Walz right now.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's awesome. How about you, Jamar? What are some of your takeaways?
Was aggressively normal, and that's dangerous. So I saw a lot of chatter online that said, oh, how respectful they're being, how civil. It's nice to see an actual debate and people talking. Yes, but zoom out, and the big picture is J.D. Vance is Donald Trump's running mate. And we know exactly what Trump stands for, and we know what Trump would look for in a running mate. So what's dangerous about someone like J.D. Vance is he can lie really slick. He can sound good doing it. And I think that will dupe a lot of people to maybe not support Vance or Trump if they weren't already, but it'll turn the knob for them a little bit to say, well, they both sides kind of have a point. Let me think about it. Let me debate, and lose sight of the big picture that Walz put so well toward the end of the debate. Are we going to have someone who stands up for democracy or someone who stands up for Donald Trump?
Yeah, I know. I really appreciate that point, Jamar. We said earlier while the debate was happening, I said, listen, regardless of how nice J.D. Vance and how normal he might sound here, he was just with Lance Wallnau, a serious Christian nationalist, architect of the Seven Mountain Mandate. So, and he also hangs out with, I don't know, the author of the people behind Project 2025, right? So a lot of his talk around abortion and trying to sound more of like almost like a centrist. Yeah, maybe he's saying that, but the people who he hangs out with have a very different approach to that conversation. So I appreciate you calling that out. Andrew, how about you? I mean, anything surprise you in this debate? Any big takeaways from your vantage point?
Well, Qasim, you outdid me on notes. I was at 6 pages, so well done. I mean, I think I agree with what's been said so far. I worried about the normalization of J.D. Vance and his Christian nationalism and his completely extreme stances going into this, standing on stage with a very normal, empathetic Tim Walz, what that was going to do to J.D. Vance, who is, I actually have written down, Jamar, slick liar. I also have slimy, and then it says F. I can't read the rest of it. But he is a very, very well-trained and good debater. And when you have somebody like that who does not care about being truthful in any way, shape, or form, up there against a normal guy who does care about being truthful and is empathetic, it has this effect of normalizing J.D. Vance, which I do think that was dangerous. But overall, I think this is going to be like most VP debates and have very little impact. Susan Davis on NPR said something like, the case for VP debates is if you do well, nobody remembers, and if you do terrible, nobody forgets. I think this is probably a debate that nobody remembers.
Yeah. No, I understand that. I will say, and anyone can answer this or
comment
on
Tim,
it.
Hang on. Can I also just say, April, it's your publication week, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes,
Today.
Today. Happy Publication Day. Yeah.
Yes, right here. Star Spangled Jesus. Got it ready.
Okay. All right.
The book we need.
Yes. And by the way, Jamar endorsed the book, so it's great to see that. One of the things that struck me surprisingly, Andrew, you and I were talking about this before we went on. You were saying how you were kind of concerned because Walz is kind of just like a typical dad who has kids and is doing his politic thing. And JD is on these far-right podcasts all the time. He's kind of used to being in these conversations and having these quick talking points. But I got to be honest, from my vantage point, and anyone can comment on this, I thought in the beginning it was clear Walz had some nerves in him for sure. But as he got warmed up, I'm like, this guy is articulate, he's clear, he's responding in a really witty way, but again, in a way that was non-dehumanizing. To me, I thought Walz got stronger and stronger as the night went on. I think perhaps maybe one of his strongest, well, he had several, but I think his talk, the gun control conversation he was really strong on, the abortion conversation, and when he really pinned JD and said, can you just say that that you guys lost the election? And he couldn't say that. I thought that was so telling.
Yeah, I thought Walz had some phenomenal zingers in there, right? The one about Pence, that, you know, Pence certified, that's why he's not here right now. There's a comment about this about the Sandy Hook shooters, about, you know,
yes,
like, you know, use support reps about with the Sandy Hook victims, and it was pretty obvious after that. So I think those zingers are gonna help a lot. But what I really like is, and I think I might respectfully disagree. I think people will remember this about Walz because this was kind of his coming out party. And when he talked about the solutions to these issues, he's like, look, in Minnesota, we did this. We accomplished this. We solved this. And so you have Vance talking about, we got to be pro-family. We got to pass these pro-family policies. Meanwhile, Walz is hitting him on, okay, you talk about pro-family, but you kill the child tax credit. You try to kill the ACA. You talk about freedom of getting into people's bedrooms. We did the opposite, and look at how great we are. I think the one quote that I loved about his was, it's a false, we reject a false choice of jobs or climate. We reject a false choice of business or family. We find ways to make them both work, and that's why we're effective. I think that's got to appeal. Oh, and last thing I'll say is, he did an excellent job, I thought, of appealing to rural farmers, of appealing to rural voters in general, talking about the suicide rates, talking about the lack of infrastructure access, talking about the need to have trade for the crops that they grow and their livelihood is on. I mean, I run for office in rural parts of the country. That's the stuff they love to hear, that Democrats used to talk about, but haven't in a long time. I think Walz is the perfect messenger for that.
Yeah.
I'm surprised that JD Vance didn't try to blame immigrants for January 6th. Because that seemed to be where he went for everything else. I wanted to ask you all what you thought. Abortion, obviously, you see JD Vance and both Donald Trump trying to kind of tiptoe around their actual stances on abortion because it's so unpopular. But I've also seen, especially in more conservative Christian nationalist spaces, a lot of them being upset that they're not taking a firmer line on abortion. But I also don't see any of them like not supporting them as a result of that. What do you think the play is for them on the abortion issue? Do you think the fact that Vance tonight kind of teeter and played the middle ground on it is going to win any moderates? Or do you think there's a chance that he could push any really pro-life conservatives away?
This is the section in the notes where I wrote the slimy. And if you listen to Vance's answer, I'm going to go back and listen to it. Actually, it was we want to do this, we want to do this, we want to do this. It was never what they will do, and he was never pinned down on any of that. And I mean, I do think this was an answer where Walz also excelled, and he did. Vance did all these these tricky debate things, like, oh no, I don't want a national ban. I'm just talking about a national standard or a standard,
right?
Like,
yes,
which is effectively a ban, right? Like it's these things that kind of play to his strength, and I do agree. So April, to your question, like, I don't know what kind of movement. Typically, like, even a presidential debate, like, you see like 1 to 2 points movement on, like, historically speaking, anyway. This year is, of course, weird. But I do think that the strongest answer, and I think both Jamar and Tim, you said this, was the last one, the January 6th discussion, and the really pushing Vance to just accept the reality that Donald Trump lost. And then that line, are you going to, he put it in a stark choice, and he made the audience, he gave them that choice. Who are you going to pick somebody who will honor democracy or somebody who will honor Trump?
Right.
He even
Yeah.
asked, that was a really good line. That was where he was really, really strong. He said it was a damning non-answer when Vance wouldn't do it. I thought he really, that to me is, and it was the end, which is, you're taking advantage of the recency effect. So
yeah, I love that.
I like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Jamar, I'm curious for you, because you kind of got me thinking with what you said in your opening statement, because even during the debate, I was like, wow, this reminds me almost of like a Obama Mitt Romney type of debate. Like, there's so much like, well, I understand my opponent, and we have some common ground here. And I will admit, it did feel refreshing. Like, I haven't seen that in such a long time. But considering the people that Vance represents and his connections to things like Project 2025, Lance Wallnau, other folks like Charlie Kirk, you are right that even though JD came across in this debate as more of almost a moderate, who he actually is and what he represents is very extreme. Do you wish that Walz put a little more pressure on JD to kind of expose him for who he was, instead of trying to be, that like, hey, me and JD got disagreements, but we can get along on childcare? Like how do you kind of read that? What are your thoughts?
So in a debate format, I think you're sort of limited in how aggressive you can be towards your opponent, because it will be interpreted as being mean or not nice, and the other person will end up looking much more civil, quote unquote. I do think that so from an impression standpoint, and these televised debates are very much about the impression that they leave with people rather than the actual substance of what they said. I think it helped out both Vance and Walz. So for Vance, he tripped over his own feet in public statements and rallies, and came across looking like someone who wanted to be cool but really didn't know how, and has said some outlandish things that didn't help him, and people talking about, well, maybe this wasn't a great choice for Trump. It's not really helping him.
Right.
In this debate, he was more in his element. He had rehearsed answers. He came across and delivered them well. Walz, I was concerned about, would he be able to translate that folksy charm that he has on the debate or the campaign trail? Would that be able to translate effectively into a debate stage? Because even if someone is intelligent, has all the right answers, if their delivery looks a certain way, people can downplay that. People can get the wrong impression. And I think Walz did very well. Sometimes we forget that he's governor of a state. And it came across that he has that experience here. I do think there were some missed opportunities where Walz could have pressed much harder on a number of factors around. I mean, JD flip-flopping on Trump.
Yeah.
Saying, things that absolutely did not like Trump, said, things directly in opposition to Trump's presidency and policies. And I believe some things that the liberal media said, and now that I know the truth, well, I'm on board. We could have pressed that a lot harder, just as one example.
Yeah.
He never brought up that he was a convicted felon either. JD Vance going on and on about being a law and order. How do you not bring that up?
That's one of the points that I really wish they had brought up, that people in polling trust Trump more on the economy. This is a man who's declared bankruptcy multiple times. He's barred from doing business in New York because he's defrauded people so many times. You as an individual or a company wouldn't want to do business with Trump, but you trust him with the largest economy in the world? It makes no sense.
I liked the closing statement from Walz as well. I mean, he was kind of everywhere. I mean, to bring up, I mean, he packed a lot in there. He brought up Sanders, Dick Cheney, Taylor Swift, Maya Angelou, FDR, and then he quotes Vance to say that Trump makes the people I care about afraid. Yeah, I mean that was a pretty effective masterclass in closing that out. I will add to your question about why not bring up he's a felon. The polling that I've seen shows that it actually doesn't move the needle that much, and has a potential of making Democrats look elitist. So that's probably why he didn't bring it up that much. Yeah, it's interesting.
Wild.
I know.
Yeah.
A moral standard only applies to the godless party, apparently, right? You know,
Yeah.
we're all godless, and so therefore,
well, at least one of you on this stream is. You know, I had to bring it up. Qasim,
I'm happy to be the token
yeah.
godless.
Well, I gotta say, I didn't plan for that to be this way, but we have a Muslim, a Christian, and an atheist all in the panel. Like, it just worked out like the best way possible.
That's like the startup of a joke.
Yeah.
To a bar.
Qasim, I did, and again, anyone can speak into this, but you and I talk about this topic a lot, so I'm going to talk to you about it. Obviously, the opening questions, right, with Israel and what's happening right now with Iran and sending missiles to Tel Aviv. You know, I got to say, if there's one thing I really strongly disagree with still with the Waltz or the Harris-Waltz, approach, it is still this very much like, no matter what, Israel has a right to defend itself kind of mantra, which, of course, to be clear, and just to be extra clear, we as new evangelicals denounce all forms of violence, no matter who's doing them. Like that, it's a hard stop for us. So I'm not justifying any attack by anyone that hurts or kills people, to be incredibly clear about that. But I did want to get kind of your thoughts. I thought about you when Walt said what he said, and I'm like, man, like, it's just frustrating that we can't seem to have an honest conversation about what's going on in the Middle East, our complicity in this, and the fact that, like, what's happening with these countries and really with Israel, really the IDF, in the relentless bombing of Gaza and other places. It just seems so like, why can't we talk about it? I'd love just to kind of hear your thoughts as you were watching that and get your reaction.
I was talking to a friend of mine about this. I think Kamala may need to pull a Hubert Humphrey at this point and distance herself from Biden and say, look, this is a different approach, a different policy. There's a viral clip right now floating from 2019, I think, when Harris was running for president, about how under Trump, we've now gotten ourselves to the brink of war with Iran, and how this is reckless and a complete failure in leadership. And we need a steady hand at the in the White House to ensure we don't get to a point where we're on the cusp of war with Iran. And now here we are. And, there's plenty of reports from Politico, Washington Post that show that secretly the White House was urging Netanyahu to invade and bomb Lebanon as well, knowing full well the civilian casualties that would be lost. There's the contrast between George Bush condemning Israel bombing and killing a Hamas leader because it killed 7 civilians. The White House issued a press release in 2002 condemning Israel for doing this.
Wow.
And now in 2024, the White House is issuing a press release praising Israel for killing Hassan Nasrallah and killing 1,000 civilians alongside. So there's been a major shift that's happened. And I think people need to understand that as well. I mean, we went from Ronald Reagan, who I would argue is probably one of the worst presidents we've ever had because of his horrific economic policies, to say the least, as a starting point. But Ronald Reagan calling the prime minister of Israel and telling him to stop immediately bombing Lebanon because the photo of one child, innocent child who was killed, appeared in the news, to now, by some estimates from the Lancet, we're at over 200,000 civilians killed. And there's indiscriminate aid, military aid being sent to Israel while it's being blocked. And then Blinken is lying about it in Congress. And so where I am in this space, from a matter of justice and someone who's been to occupied Palestine, this is untenable. This is unsustainable. It's a violation of our constitutional principles, of our moral principles. Whether you're of faith or no faith, it violates every ethics and norm imaginable. And my fear is that the mantra that Republicans are pushing out there, that, look, Donald Trump was in charge, there was no wars, we were at peace, look what's happened that he's gone now. It's a false narrative, but it's going to be effective. And if Biden does not get control of the situation by upholding international law, I don't know how Harris wins. I really don't. And I'll close with this point. We need to win Michigan, right? Trump won Michigan by 10,000 votes in 2016. Right now, you have 100,000 uncommitted voters saying that we will not vote for Harris, and you have another 80,000 Lebanese American voters in Michigan who are watching what's happening right now. How do you win Michigan when you're shooting yourself in the foot, literally, in situations like that? So I get fired up about this topic because of the loss of life. But that's where I think Biden needs to show leadership, show some humanity,
and stop this war from progressing it any further.
100%. I mean, I said today on Threads, I said it's really hard to believe that you're, quote, doing everything you can for a ceasefire while you're still signing the checks, for the bombs that are being sent overseas. Like, and again, like, obviously we all know where I stand on a lot of issues. Like, we're way more progressive than the Christian Nationalists for sure. We're all about that. And it's because of these ethics, though, that I say I have to have principle over party, as Sharon McMahon says, right? And even if it's the people that I am in some way like rooting for, we still have to call it out when bad things are happening, because what drives us crazy about Christian nationalism is how they're always moving their moral goalposts to justify why their guy is the anointed one. I don't want to do that, and especially with what we're seeing happen in real time, and we're seeing the videos, and we've been seeing the videos for almost a year now. I agree with you, Qasim, on this. Like I do think that Harris would do herself a huge favor, along with the team, to actually say something that says we have a whole different approach than what Biden is doing here, because what he's doing is not working, and children are dying indiscriminately. And last thing I'll say, and then I'll hand it back over to anyone who wants to add commentary to this, and then we can wrap up. And again, friends, if you're watching live, thank you so much. It means the world to have about 1,000 people still tuned in to watch. So it's just super humbling to have you, and hopefully you're enjoying this panel. We try to pick some of the best and brightest for these conversations. But I was watching CNN today, and I was listening to the commentator, and he was saying that he has inside sources to the White House, and that according to his inside sources who have been here for a long time, there is not one major decision maker who is at all concerned about what Israel is doing, period, in the region. Like, they're just not concerned about it. Like, they are really all in on everything. And this is on CNN live. And I'm just like, well, that honestly makes sense, because regardless of what Biden is saying, the actions speak infinitely louder than any of his words. So I agree. I mean, this is I think history is going to look back again very poorly on whoever is in office in allowing this to go on without even condemning it publicly, let alone still signing the checks. Jamar, Andrew, if you have anything you want to add, feel free. If not, I understand it could be a sensitive topic for some, but we'd love to hear your thoughts if you have any.
Well, I mean, it's horrific. It's a genocide. Let's name it. It's a taking advantage of this situation to achieve longstanding far-right political and military ends by basically eliminating the Palestinian people from the entire land. And now it's expanding to Lebanon and perhaps even the entire region. That is one of the things that I think over the course of the next 30 plus days leading up to the election is really going to matter in terms of which way the election falls. There's only one good solution, which is to end the killing, right? And the United States has to own its part in enabling it. But when it comes down to the voting booth and you have a choice between Harris-Walz and Trump-Vance, you got to decide, right? And so I go back to history. I'm a historian. Frederick Douglass said this in a newspaper column. He was writing to someone who was asking him about his opinion on the state of politics at that point. And he said, my advice, he was writing to Black people. He said, my advice to colored men everywhere is to stick to the party of freedom, but tell them your wants. Hold the party up to its profession. Do your best to keep it in power, but hold it accountable. And I think that's where we stand in this two-party system, where you're going to vote for one or the other, or perhaps for a third party or another choice. But we also have to look at who can we push? Who can we force to, through our vote, through our political pressure, to make better decisions?
Yeah, agreed. Andrew, anything you want to add?
Man, how can I add to that?
Fair enough. I cannot thank the three of you for hopping on at literally 11 p.m. Eastern to talk to me in April and our community. It means the world. Really quick, before you leave, I want everyone to plug their socials. Qasim, let's start with you. Where can folks find you and follow you?
I'm at Qasim Rashid across all platforms, QASIM whatever platform you use, I'm probably on there. And I write on Substack daily human rights articles.
at a blog called Let's Address This, but also at justqasemrashid.com.
Love that. Jamar?
I got to plug the Substack too. Who knows what the algorithm is going to do? But if you sign up for the Substack, go to jamartisby.substack.com. I write about the intersection of history, race, culture, and current events there. And so that's jamartisby.substack.com. I've also got a brand new book out.
Yes.
Called The Spirit of Justice, True Stories of Faith, Race, and Resistance. I think it gives us the hope we need from true stories of historical figures, available wherever
excellent.
books are sold.
It's
Thank you,
great.
Andrew.
Andrew.
I am Andrew L. Seidel, Seidel, on all of the things. I am refraining from starting a Substack for the time being. I'm not there yet. I do. Wait, can I also just add one other part of the debate that I really enjoyed?
Oh, yeah, of course.
It was from a moderator, and I just don't want it to go unnoticed. When I don't remember which it was, but when they said, "Thank you for describing the legal process."
Yes.
Yeah, I loved it. It was really
I died.
Yeah. And I haven't been on Twitter to like see how certain people are reacting, but I'm sure that went down.
That was great.
Anyway, I enjoyed it.
Yeah. I thought the moderators were great.
They were good. Andrew, you have two great books out too. You have The Founding Myth.
Oh yeah. Yeah, The Founding Myth: Why Christian Nationalism is Un-American. I don't care if you buy it. You just go to the library.
It's such a good book though. It's worth reading.
Amen.
Thanks. Yeah, if you've ever heard like the myth, any of the myths about the United States being founded as a Christian nation, I wrote this book to end those debates. And then American Crusade: How the Supreme Court is Weaponizing Religious Freedom is about the hostile takeover orchestrated on the U.S. Supreme Court and what it has been doing in the name of religious freedom ever since.
I love it. Right. Awesome. Well, thank you to all of you for coming on. It means the world. Friends, I want to thank you so much for being here. It is, like I said, truly an honor. And let me just say, well, I have 800 of you here live with me. The people that we had in that panel, they are offering better paths forward. They're offering better narratives. They are offering better stories. They're offering better history that's grounded in data. So if you're looking for like just better ways of being, I recommend following all of them, reading their books, and supporting them. The way that we do this work is because of generosity of people like you. That's how folks like Jamar and Qasim and Andrew are able to do the work that they do, including ourselves. If you want to donate, we are a nonprofit. You can go to thenewevangelicals.com/donate or do a super chat. And again, speaking from the heart, I am humbled that I get to do this for a living, talking to all of you and watching this debate not alone. This would be torture watching it by myself. I'd be rage tweeting. It'd be a disaster. It's so much more fun watching it with thousands of people, reading the comments, hanging out with all of you. I'm almost kind of sad that the whole debate cycle is over, because what else are we going to watch for 2.5 hours and get drunk on? I don't know. But again, I thank you for your time. Subscribe to the channel. We'll talk to you all next time. Have a good one.